Yeah.
Max, have you given me a go? Not quite.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate it. It is Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. Out of an abundance of caution, we are conducting this as a virtual workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock a.m. I'd like to make note, we'll do roll call. We'd like each commissioner to please raise your hand as you cite your name. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Richard Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Pat Caluzzi.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Edward Shanowski.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners. We're able to formally conduct business because we have a quorum here. Also with me today is City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis.
Good morning.
Public Works Director Kevin Williams. Project Coordinator Evan Miller. Rehoboth Beach Patrol Captain Jeff Giles. Rehoboth Beach Police Chief Keith Banks. Building and Licensing Supervisor Matt Janis. Jean Lee in her former position of data collection. I'm sorry, Jean, I don't know your title. Now you're in payroll, I believe, and she's here with us today. We have Mike Wigley from the engineering firm Davis Bowen Friedel, and I think Sharon is on here, city manager, with us sporadically also during this meeting. Welcome, everybody. Would like to make note the passing of Paula Simpson. Just keep her family in your prayers or thoughts, if you don't mind. She was our treasurer for, I believe, over 2 decades, and she passed away suddenly about a week ago. With that, I want to welcome all the watchers, everybody that's watching live or recorded later. I'd like to recognize that those that aren't here in the room with us are able to speak if they pre-register, and we have pre-registered Carol Everhart of the Rehoboth Beach Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce, and we have the City of Rehoboth resident Walter Brittingham, both signed up. Welcome, and you know the routine. We will call on you at appropriate times throughout the meeting. With that, I want to remind everybody that we have support documents that are embedded in the agenda, and how you access them as you go to cityofrehoboth.com. On the right side center, click on the legislative portal, and then search for your meeting in the top right calendar, and you'll bring up the meeting agenda, and you should be able to access all the documents that we have in advance of the meeting will be embedded in there. Let's see here. We're going to go next to announce deletions. Because of time constraints and then some things we're just not ready for. The first item of old business, A, that has to do with the potential repeal of administrative mergers and separations, is being removed from the agenda today. Also, the item H of old business, which is discuss guidelines for utilizing online support documents. We're going to postpone that to another meeting when we can try to combine it with some other policies at the same time. So those 2 items have been removed from this agenda. Otherwise, we'll continue. We've got correspondence identified that's been received in time. If it's received timely, it is embedded into the agenda when we can. We have 3 letters from the Rehoboth Beach homeowners, from Tina Alexander and from Suzanne Good, relative to the waste, recycling, yard waste topic. And we've got correspondence from Steve Mann, who lives just outside the town, and Honey Fisher, who lives inside the town, regarding the Dolly's sign and its disposition. With that, we want to move on to the city manager's report. Evan Miller's going to give that today. Go ahead, Evan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public. Just a report on the Labor Day weekend. We were happy to report that all went well during the 3-day long weekend. The crowds were certainly plentiful, and although the police department was busy responding to calls, there was nothing serious noted other than a bomb threat at Zelke's on the boardwalk, which is still under investigation. The Chamber's Red, White, and Blue event kicked off smoothly and was a success, as was the grand reopening of the convention center with Camp's Sunfest celebration. That went smoothly with a good turnout of people as well. The Rehoboth Beach Patrol averaged 20 to 24 guards throughout the weekend, which, although was lower than normal, was a good representation. They responded to 5 saves, 3 assists, 17 lost children, and 13 wheelchair requests with 6 minor EMT calls. The Public Works Department was busy with no major events at the wastewater treatment plant. There was one issue at Well 8 that caused the water department to turn off water for a period of time, but nothing remarkable. The streets department was busy as usual with trash, but they managed to do a great job to clean the streets and boardwalk periodically throughout the weekend. Building and Grounds was kept busy with plumbing issues at the women's restroom on Delaware Avenue. Regarding yard waste drop-off, so the city's providing a new service. Residents and businesses may now drop off yard waste at the city's recycle yard from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 37540 Oyster House Road. The yard waste that is dropped off need not adhere to the maximum size requirements in place for residential yard waste pickup, which the city will also continue to provide. It's important to note that yard waste in plastic bags will not be accepted. Yard waste must be dropped off loose or in paper yard waste bags. Regarding the parking department, due to short staffing and because we're now seeing fewer visitors, the parking department office will close at 4 p.m. Monday, September 13th, and on the last day of the season, Sunday, September 19th. These are on meterless Mondays. However, we were keeping some staff on for an extra 2 hours, just the event that we received some calls from the public. And then following that last day of the season on Sunday, September 19th, Monday, September 20th, a final collection will be performed on all the meters, and then all the meters will be bagged for the winter season. Regarding the public works bids, requests for bids for the annual water meter replacement and upgrades to the Delaware Avenue Comfort Station have been advertised. A pre-bid meeting for water meter replacements is scheduled for September 14th and a bid opening on September 28th. And then for the Comfort Station upgrades, a pre-bid meeting will be held September 15th with a bid opening scheduled for September 29th. And that's all I have to report, Mayor.
Are there any questions by any of the commissioners? Commissioner Legree? Unmute yourself.
I just love this.
There we go.
Could you remind the public that that we still have conventional recycling opportunities at the Oyster House Road yard?
That's correct. Do you happen to know, Kevin, the days? Monday, Friday, and Saturday. That's also, again, at the recycle yard. The address for that is 37540 Oyster House Road.
Thanks, Evan. We're going to be discussing recycling today, and it's nice to keep that on our mind.
Sure.
Thanks, Mayor.
Commissioner Gay, please.
Yes, Evan, I'm wondering if it's possible to get a brief update about the status of the CDP.
I don't know that I have an update to provide. I know Matt's in the room with us. He might have a little bit more information than I could provide. I do know that I was in contact with Debbie File several weeks ago, mostly related to some additional data collection that's ongoing. So I had provided her with some of that information, some of the data that she requested. So I believe she's going through that now and incorporating that into the CIP. But that would be all that I have to report.
Well, and
Okay.
Debbie is on the agenda, I believe, for the Planning Commission on this Friday, so that's
Oh.
probably our best bet to receive updates at that time.
Because part of the reason I ask is I heard at a committee meeting last week that it was going to be, that the draft was going to be publicly available by the end of September, and that there was going to be a town hall scheduled, and that was news to me. So I just didn't know if that was the case. I guess also we've heard so much recently about beach overcrowding in particular that I'm really looking forward to seeing. We sort of held off on some of these issues waiting for the CDP, and I'm sure that will be a big topic within it, and I just am eager to get started, that's all. So thanks for the update. I'll wait to hear the Planning Commission report on Friday.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the commissioners regarding this city manager's report? Thank you, Evan, for giving that. We appreciate it. With that, I would like to exercise the mayor's prerogative and change the agenda. Because we have the chief police here with us, and Mike Wigley from the engineering company, and also Beach Patrol Captain Jeff Giles. I would like, if there's no objection, to skip down to new business. Item number G, discuss the interplay of the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape project of the proposed remodel of the Rehoboth Beach Patrol and public restroom facilities at Baltimore Avenue relative to options voiced by the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force. And you see the options there are to remodel the existing Beach Patrol facility and public restrooms in the same building, same location, adding family restrooms and changing rooms, and a second floor expansion for the Rehoboth Beach Patrol. Second option could be relocating the building in entirety. That is the Rehoboth Beach Patrol and the public restrooms to the boardwalk at Maryland Avenue or elsewhere. Another option could be separating the public restrooms from the Rehoboth Beach Patrol facility and relocating just the public restrooms to another location, and of course, any other options. I would like to, I think it's important, so I would like to give a little background on this. Years ago, at least 2 to 3 years ago, the Boardwalk and Beach Patrol Committee met and addressed the concern by constituents of the need for family restrooms. At that time, the Boardwalk and Beach Committee analyzed and agreed that we needed to update and provide family restrooms. Family restrooms meaning gender-neutral restrooms that are freestanding and have the ability to accommodate 2, 3, 4, even 5 people in there of different sexes, so that they can help each other out, if you will. Out of that came a recommendation to add family restrooms and changing rooms to the Delaware Avenue restrooms. That project was favored by the mayor and commissioners and funded, is ready to go to bid shortly, and with the goal of construction after summer and be ready for summer of 2022. At the same time, the Boardwalk and Beach Committee made recommendation that for the Baltimore area facilities, which houses the Beach Patrol as well as men's and women's public restrooms, that we should also add family restrooms there and changing rooms at that facility. And part of that discussion, concurrently, the Boardwalk and Beach Committee was addressing a request by the then Beach Patrol Captain Kent Buxton to add a observation deck to that building so that they could see farther up and down the boardwalk. The Boardwalk and Beach Committee liked that, thought it was a great idea, and was a benefit and safety asset for the Beach Patrol, and they agreed to that. In fact, when looking at them both together, adding a second floor for the Beach Patrol that included a observation deck worked very well, because that area down below that some of the Beach Patrol consumed would be able to utilize expanded women's restrooms and be able to facilitate the extra family restrooms and changing rooms. The one caveat was that we recommended leaving the medical facilities for the Beach Patrol and an information kiosk on the first level so people could just walk up to it. So we are at the stage now, again, where the Delaware Avenue restrooms are ready to go to bid and be realized, thank goodness. And with that, the mayor and commissioners, funded engineering for looking at the Baltimore Avenue public restrooms and beach patrol facility. And it is currently getting engineered, it's being designed, they've got floor plans done, and some of that I think will be shared with you today. And the goal there and timeline there is that the expectation is it would be done exactly 1 year following the realization of the Delaware Avenue restroom facility improvements. In other words, for the summer of 2023, provided we maintain the schedule we have right now, which has been fairly rigid. And the reason I point that out is because if we throw any wrenches in there, it may cause that to be delayed or something. So coming up to date on the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force, one of the, part of the mission of that task force is create better pedestrian areas and traffic and wider pedestrian ways and a better gateway into the project area, which is the first 2 blocks of Baltimore, first 2 blocks of Wilmington, and the cross streets of 1st and 2nd Street. And what was driving the task force was trying to get people off of Rehoboth Avenue into the project area of Wilmington and Baltimore, but also trying to get people and invite them off the boardwalk onto Wilmington and onto Baltimore Avenue. So during those discussions, several of the members, couple members of the task force came up with an idea and suggested that for the best optimum gateway to invite people off the boardwalk, should we consider, they would like consideration of relocating the beach patrol facilities and the public restrooms in the options that I noted. One is moving the entire building in entirety to the end of Maryland Avenue or elsewhere. One of the options was separating the public restrooms. Leave the beach patrol at Baltimore, by example, and make that a smaller footprint than maybe it is now, even though we'd be adding a 2nd floor to it. And by splitting that out and relocating the public restrooms to somewhere else, unspecified, but probably or possibly Maryland Avenue. And then any other options. And of course, the final option is to do nothing, so to speak, leave it in place and remodel the beach patrol building, adding a 2nd floor in the same location and adding the family restrooms and the changing rooms. And so we thought it timely to put this on the agenda now, especially again because there's time constraints on this. Anything we do to modify the current plan path forward with remodeling in place and putting additions in place could delay the start by as much as another year because we look at construction in yearly increments. So we'll find today. So we will, the intent today is to talk with staff and get their opinions on pros and cons of relocating for those different options. And to give us commissioners an introductory discussion of what we might want to do. And if you follow the guidelines that were embedded in the agenda, it somewhat summarizes what I just said. And on the 2nd page, it has some draft criteria for evaluating. Those are just some things I threw together to get us a foundation for discussion today. And certainly you all can come up with your own criteria. So I think it'd be best to start with staff on evaluating these different possibilities. And We've got staff here with us today, the Chief of Police, who is the supervisor of the Beach Patrol. We've got Captain Jeff Giles of the Beach Patrol here. We've got Mike Wigley from Davis, Bowen, Friedel, the engineer, is going to share some ideas and designs with us so we can get a first look at the massing of the proposed building. Matt Janis is going to talk a little bit about the flood zones and if there's any impacts for us there. And so, Chief, do you have any preference for, does any commissioners have any questions before we begin? If Commissioner Legree, you're okay?
I'll have questions as we go forward, as representing the Boardwalk and Beach Committee.
Sure, absolutely. Let's just go ahead and start off with the Mike, so we can kind of get a good picture of what is proposed and the path we're headed right as of now. And then we also asked Mike to throw in some pictures of what would happen if we relocated to Maryland Avenue. And so, Mike, I'll turn it over to you to give your spiel, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back at a workshop meeting. Last time I was at a workshop meeting, we were in the basement of the old building, so it's really nice to get into this facility and to be able to present to you. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Let's see, I want to pull up let me show you the floor plans first. Can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. This is the first floor plan of the proposed building. At the bottom of the page is the boardwalk, and you may recognize the toilet rooms. This particular drawing, if you see a wall that is not colored black, that means that's an existing wall that's going to remain. If you see a wall that's colored black, that's a new wall that's being introduced into the building. So you can see where the existing men and women's toilet rooms are. One of the main parts of the project was to see if we could add fixtures, and we are doing that. We are adding 5 toilets in the women's room, an additional 3 lavatories. On the men's side, we're adding 2 additional urinals and 1 additional lavatory. In addition to those 2 rooms, we're adding 2 family restrooms, gender neutral, that you can see down below. The one on the left actually has an adult changing table built into it. The one on the right has a baby changing station to it. Those are really the unique parts of an ADA accessible restroom, but they are individually doored, as you can see. We're also adding changing rooms to the outside of the building. You can see 2 of them are accessible, 2 of them are the same. And then down below, we've reworked this section to include a medical room for first aid, immediate first aid capabilities. It's got a medical room, a supply room, and an ADA toilet room with a shower built into it. A small office at the front with a sliding window, and then some general storage located here. One of the challenges with the boardwalk is making sure we maintain complete ADA accessibility. We do have a bit of a step up to get into the facility, so you'll see a couple small ramps on the boardwalk. Over here you'll see steps, but there is a natural grade change as you work your way up to Baltimore Avenue. And fortunately, that section of it is ADA compliant, so we're able to just come right on to this landing, if you will, to access the changing rooms and the men's side of the toilet facility. So from the boardwalk, we are ADA compliant with everything that you see. And I'll move on to the next floor unless anybody has any questions now.
Probably we can ask questions, I guess, on the individual thing. It might also be prudent to wait till the end and we can go back to some of those. So judge what you want. I just would like you to reiterate the outline of the existing building and the extra width added by this design.
Okay, so the existing building, if you follow my cursor, follows this line
Okay,
like this.
I see. Yeah.
So we're actually filling in, if you can remember, if you look at the building, there's an indentation under the roof, and we're filling that in with the family restrooms. In terms of the changing rooms, which are outside the facility, there we're adding approximately 14 feet to the south and about 21 feet in this direction. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
May I ask a question,
Yes,
Mayor?
go ahead, Commissioner.
Mike, is there any plans to add outside showers and stand-up showers for around this building anywhere?
That had not been discussed, no. There is an existing drinking fountain over here that we're likely going to relocate over to here to free up some space there. But that has not been part of the discussion yet.
Outside showers are very popular up and down the New Jersey beaches. Just a thought.
Thank you. Let's go to the next floor. I'm sorry, Commissioner Gossett, did you have a question on first floor or?
Yes, I did. Are the family restrooms ADA accessible?
Yes, they are.
Both of them?
Both of them are, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And on the changing rooms, are they all completely dry? There's no sinks or showers or anything in the changing room?
That's correct also, yes. There's a bench
Thank
in
you.
there. Mhm.
Commissioner, that's actually modeled, if you will, modeled on the New Jersey boardwalk facilities that Jay and I toured over the years. The changing rooms were just absolutely nothing but a room and a little bench. No source of water or anything. And then the family restrooms, of course, were full facilities. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Okay, so this is the next floor up. So what we're doing is we're taking the roof off the existing building, building a new floor up above it. It essentially fits into the same footprint of the floor down below. And before I speak about how we get into the building, I'll at least show you how the floor itself is laid out. So if you come in directly off of the end of Baltimore Avenue, you come into a multi-purpose room. This is where the beach patrol will gather before they head out. I think the captain can speak more in detail about how it operates. Over on the south side, we have men's lockers. On the north side, we have women's lockers. They all have toilet and shower facilities. As you work your way down, there is a break area on the beach side, and then captain's office over in the corner on the north side. We're proposing a deck. This particular drawing shows a large deck all the way across. I think that's subject to design when we ultimately do it. I think the main idea is to be able to get out onto the deck, be able to see up and down the coast as best as possible. And to that end, one of the options is to introduce an observation room, which would be one more flight up. And you can see the stair over here that leads up to that. And I'll show you a computer model in a minute that shows how that could work if that's the direction everybody would like to go. One of the challenges to the building is being able to get to it from the end of Baltimore Avenue. We've got a relatively short distance from the end of the street, so this particular option takes 5 feet off the end of Baltimore Avenue to create a sidewalk that connects both sides. You can see a series of ramps to make sure that we're ADA compliant. You would start from the sidewalk, you would ramp up to a landing, then ramp up again to get us up to this point. We need to come up about 5 feet to get up to this floor. There's a series of stairs that lead you up. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we worked out was if there was an emergency situation and patrol members needed to leave the building quickly, they could come down, they'd take the ramp down steps, grab kayaks if need be, ATV still being able to be parked here, and then get on out to the beach. So we wanted to make sure that flow was maintained. We also, one of the requests was to try to open this area up as much as possible to make this maybe a more welcoming approach to the boardwalk. There's an existing transformer that's here that we have chosen not to move, but instead have relocated the retaining wall to make the changing area down below work out a little bit better. I do need to point out that the grade from the end of Baltimore Avenue right now down to the boardwalk exceeds ADA capabilities. So, you know, we do have ADA accessibility to this floor from Baltimore and ADA accessibility to the lower floor from the boardwalk. It's close. It's not like so dramatic that it's not, you know, it's negotiable. But in terms of today's ADA requirements, it's a little bit too steep to meet those right now as it is. So I'm glad to answer any questions about this floor if you'd like. If not, I'm glad to move on to a 3D massing model to show you what the what it may look like three-dimensionally.
Commissioner Calusi here.
Go ahead, Commissioner Calusi.
So the ADA for this floor, this floor is to be used by the lifeguards. Is that the idea?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So, and you're saying the current configuration doesn't really meet ADA requirements because it's too steep?
The current sidewalks from the high side of Baltimore Avenue down to the boardwalk. But the building itself is ADA accessible.
Well, look, I don't want to dwell on this left side here against Grotto Pizza not being ADA compliant. When we rebuilt the boardwalk, we had their Del Dot ADA expert out there, and she was okay with our program there.
Well, and I'm fine. That's not going to be my question. Excuse me. My question is it necessary for this level to be ADA compliant?
Pretty much everything we need to do needs to be ADA compliant, new construction, correct?
Yeah, yes, and I think there has been, if you're thinking because it's just for beach patrol, there has been some discussion about the multi-purpose room being available for other uses. I'm not sure where that discussion stands. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to the mayor's point, I don't want to overdo this ADA discussion because the boardwalk is completely ADA accessible from other locations, as is Baltimore Avenue. It's just in this particular location, getting from the top to the bottom.
Well, the point I want to make is we don't want to mislead. We are legal.
Correct. Yes.
Like this is Patrick Gossett. I have one question with regards. Is there only really one entrance and exit into this level of the building, and is that fire code compliant?
Yes, it is.
Let's take a look at the massing. I think it'll show you some elevations and give you a better idea. I will give a little caveat that while there's an option for a observation deck on the third floor, as far as I know, that has not been determined, and that's something between the Beach Patrol captain, Chief Banks, and Sharon, I believe. So again, you're going to see some of that, but I don't know that it's determined to add that observation deck on the third floor, whereas they may find that the observation deck on the second floor is sufficient to be determined. Go ahead, Mike. Thank you.
Sure. So I just want to show this real quickly. In some regards, this is what you have right now. You can see the ADA ramp, that's for the new building, but I wanted to show you what the current massing of the building looks like before I move on to what's proposed.
So if I can, let me orient ourselves for anybody new watching. The Atlantic Sands is on the left side. The Grotto Pizza satellite, if you will, is on the right side there. And then, of course, the existing building, that's the existing Beach Patrol building, except you have added the handicap entry to
Correct.
that.
Yes. And let me just, before I move on to the next model, I just want to let everybody know that these are what we call massing models. We have not got into the design at all of the building. We just wanted to give you some idea of what the bulk of the building would look like. We also, in the design of the building, we wanted to be sensitive that the highest part of the building would be right in the middle, so it doesn't favor view angles on one side or the other of the street. We also wanted to suggest that a hip roof would be the least obtrusive type of a roof for the building. So those were really the only considerations in terms of the massing that may look at all like any sort of a design attempt. But again, massing models are just to give you some idea of the bulk of the building. So let me show you what the building would look like without the observation tower first. So if you remember, essentially this massing model just pulls that roof up a floor. So it gives you some idea of how that building would look. And as we work our way around, this is looking straight down on top. So what we talked about before with the accessibility and the stairs, you can see how the roof plan works there for the massing study. This would essentially be how it looks from the boardwalk.
Mike, do you have that same type of massing view that it exists right now?
This one right here?
Yeah, without the third floor.
Okay, so this is the second floor. You say third floor being the
I'm sorry,
observation?
without the second floor.
Yes.
Well, that's the first one he showed.
I didn't see a view shed from the boardwalk.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
I saw the west elevation.
Okay.
Can you do a 360 or something around that? There you go.
Yeah, so that doesn't have the roof on it. Let me
Okay.
see.
You showed a minute ago, you showed a view down the boardwalk. What does it look like now? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think it's important that we all see that.
Okay, does that help? Because these particular angles, I don't have the roof on it, but I think it gives you a general
Yeah,
good
that's
feel for
fine.
what the one story looks like.
Jay, what's your recollection? You and I toured 19 boardwalk towns in New Jersey over the course of 10 years, 2 times. What is your recollection on Beach Patrol building? See if you mirror what I recall.
Well, my recollection is that the ones that are located upstairs seem to work better, but I just don't know. I don't know whether that's a good plan going forward or not, but it seemed like they worked well up in the Jersey Beaches. What are your thoughts? Although we did see a couple who were located downstairs in the basement, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't remember any in the basement. I think some were first floor, but the majority, my recollection is they were at least 2 stories.
And I think we thought they were better, as I recall.
Thank you, Mike. Go ahead.
Okay, so this would be the other option that would actually show a third floor observation tower. And you can see what we tried to do was, at least viewing it from the west, we tried to embed it into the roof as best we could. And then as we work our way around, here's the roof plan. So you can see basically in this massing study, we took the low roof from the west side and just carried it up over the observation area. And you can see then that that could be how a third floor observation tower could work.
That's a significant change in view shed.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mike, Patrick Gossett here. Can you give us any estimated heights for current proposed for the total height, second floor, and then the total height with the observation deck, all from the boardwalk?
I sure can. Would you like for it to be measured to the top of the roof from the boardwalk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, this illustration is with the third floor observation deck, which is, as far as I know, is undetermined. Is that right, Jeff? You don't? It's not. He's nodding. Yes, it's not determined yet that we're going that route. But Mike necessarily wanted to show what the capabilities were if we wanted to go to a third floor. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So this is about 31.5 feet. If we did not have an observation tower, we would be about 25 feet.
But that would be behind the view shed.
Are you referring to the, oh, okay,
Yeah.
you'd like to see this dimension from the?
No, I just said that 25 feet would be the hip of that roof, which would be back behind the angle that you'd look up and down the boardwalk.
Oh, yes, yes. So if we took it from the eave, which would be at the boardwalk. It's not cooperating here. Let's try this. About 19.5 feet.
Yep.
And then, using that same approach, what you have now is 9 to 10 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Just while you've got it, I'm making note of some of the areas on the north and the south side of that building that potentially could be murals or something to direct people up Baltimore Avenue, possibly. So this gives us a view of the existing facility, one with a second floor added and one with a third floor observation area added at Baltimore Avenue. What it does not show, and remember, this is a combination Rehoboth Beach Patrol facility and public restroom facility, both expanded. What it does not show is the one option where the public restrooms could be split out and moved elsewhere, and the Beach Patrol building left in this one location, that if you were going to do that, I would guess the rationale for doing it, one rationale for doing it might be that you could make a narrower building, so you had a greater view on the left and the right, north and south, as a possibility. But anyhow, shall we go to, you have, I think, some massing information for what happens if we decided to relocate the building to Maryland Avenue.
Mayor, this is Patrick Goss. I have a question,
Yes.
possibly of Matt Janis. That would be the current Grotto's Pizza there on the corner. that property most likely will be redeveloped at some point in the future. What is the maximum height that that building could be when redeveloped?
Just making sure this thing is on 42 feet, and that would be taken from the center line of the road.
That would be the center line of Baltimore Avenue.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
right? Because my recollection with the Atlantic Sands, which is on the other side, is they have to pick, somehow there's a formula for where they measure the center line for their height, because they go from Maryland Avenue to the boardwalk to Baltimore Avenue. And if Grotto put a hotel in, there's a possibility that they could do the same thing, go from Rehoboth to Baltimore and the boardwalk. So which is their height restriction there, or their point for measuring?
So it's not impacted by the boardwalk level. It would be Maryland Avenue and Rehoboth Avenue.
Baltimore and Maryland,
I'm sorry,
Baltimore and Rehoboth Avenue.
So the height would be 42 feet maximum, correct?
Correct.
But Patrick, that's an even more significant amount of height above the boardwalk.
I realize that.
Okay.
Commissioner Schnusky here. Mike, could you, I saw you, I think trying to take the height measurement from the peak of that Grotto's tower. Can you, for reference, can you let us know what that current height is?
Yes, that was, on my model, it's 34 feet, but keep in mind, we have no corroboration of that. That's just from photos, the best we could tell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So we asked Mike to give us a vision, a snapshot of what, this is still Baltimore, but further
Yes.
back, is that right?
Yes, this.
Okay, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
we went ahead and modeled a little bit further back. What we did, though, was we just plugged in the Beach Patrol Comfort Station building with the observation tower. So this would be, I would assume, the bulkiest of what you would see at the end of the street. But we did come a little bit further back, modeled the buildings a little bit further back so you could get a general idea of what that might look like as you approach.
This is a striking change that I was not prepared for.
Yeah, so you can see the buildings on either side have been detailed a little bit more. We introduced the Google Earth, which is a little bit more accurate on the, you'll notice a little more skew to the building compared to what we were looking at before.
Now we're looking at Maryland Avenue, where the only thing at the end of Maryland Avenue right now is a octagonal pavilion.
So if you want to see what this looks like, what we did was we switched it over, just to give you an idea of how that streetscape might look.
So we'll orient ourselves. On the left side, we've got the Boardwalk Plaza. On the right side, the Atlantic Sands. This is Maryland Avenue. So coming back westerly, we start to hit residential buildings, essentially. Yeah. The width of the street end there compared to Baltimore, is there any difference in the width or width of separation of buildings? Are they all comparable? Let's see.
About 95 feet there, just give you a general idea. About 95 feet for both. As far as the building,
Separation of
Passing.
building.
Mhm.
Okay, uh-huh. So again, that illustration includes the third floor observation deck. Without the third floor observation deck, which is, I guess, debatable, it would be less in height.
Mike, Patrick Gossett here. With regards to comparing Maryland and Baltimore, Maryland does not have that dramatic topography change in it. Is that correct or not?
yes, that is correct. We don't actually have topo information for Maryland right now. But from visual observations, it looks to me that the high point of the road where it breaks and then starts going down toward the ocean actually starts happening further back on Maryland and more gradually heads toward the boardwalk, whereas on Baltimore, the break seems to happen a little bit further down, so it's a little bit more of a dramatic change. But I think it's only 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet at the most difference. But there is a difference there, yes.
But Maryland Avenue does have a definite negative slope there. It's, by example, it's nothing like Wilmington that's, and Rehoboth that's absolutely flat. So I'll keep that in mind. If there's no more questions, you're pretty much done, Mike?
Yes, I do have some cost estimates I could show you whenever you'd like to.
Yeah, let's go on to, yeah, we can do that. Go ahead.
Okay.
And then preparing, Matt, we'll probably go to you next for comments on flood zones and any impacts on relocating. Then we'll go to Beach Patrol Captain Jeff Giles and the chief.
So this construction cost budget analysis, I think everybody could probably appreciate that it's almost like throwing darts to get construction costs at this time as volatile as things have been. But so I think, you may want to look at these more comparatively than anything. So we did one version where we're combining the lifeguard and comfort stations at Baltimore Avenue. Demolition is really just related to the roof. We're adding the toilets, renovating the entire first floor, totally new second floor. But all these include the tower, the changing rooms, and site work. Site work being relatively high at this location, given all the changes for ADA ramps and stairs. We've added some escalation to account for when the building would be built, and so we're looking at about 2.14 there. If we were to take the same building and build it totally new at Maryland, there are some advantages to the site, but the costs are relatively similar. I will say that if we are to build new, this evaluation assumes that the exact same square footage as what we're proposing to do at Baltimore. So if we were to decide to build new, there may be some changes there. That just depends because we've got the luxury of not having to work with an existing footprint. But these cost comparisons are assuming they're all the same. We did look at what would happen if we did kept the beach patrol at Baltimore Avenue and just had an entirely new facility there, and then doing an entirely new comfort station at Maryland Avenue, and you can see those costs and what those totals would be for both of those. So 2.4 million would be the comparative cost there. One of the things, if you do decide to go this route where you put 2 new buildings at both locations, where does the comfort station go? Just to give you some context, the Delaware Avenue comfort station relative to Rehoboth Avenue would match up with a Maryland Avenue location distance-wise from Rehoboth Avenue. So they'd be equal if you look at.
Say that again.
Yeah, okay. So if you look at the number of blocks that Delaware Avenue is south of Rehoboth Avenue,
Okay.
if you go from Rehoboth Avenue north, that same number of blocks, you would hit Maryland Avenue. So in terms of where you have your comfort stations located, but again, we're just, if you keep it at Baltimore, it's just a 1 block difference.
Right. Very good, thank you.
Excuse me. Compare that 2.4 against what were we before 2.1?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot.
No, it's not. I'm surprised.
So if we use round numbers, we can say essentially, if we're just relocating a building in entirety, it's comparable in price.
Yes. And,
So,
yeah. And even though we're saving the walls at Baltimore Avenue, keep in mind it's all new toilet fixtures, all the plumbing gets reworked for the most part. So you're looking at that same expense.
Yeah, Mike, that would be my question. Patrick Gossett here. With regards to building a new building versus renovating an existing building, life expectancy of a new building certainly would be longer with all furniture, fixtures, equipment, what have you. Can you just kind of confirm that or give us your expert opinion on that? And one other sideline, would both the renovation or new build, would they have fire suppression systems in them?
I'd have to research that. I for the same reason that we're able to get away with 1 exit, the building's small enough that it from a building code permit point of view, it would not need to be. I don't know if you all feel that because it's a beach patrol and emergency response type of a program that from that point of view would want it to be sprinklered. My thinking is that the building would not need to be sprinklered per code. In terms of, I think if I understood your first question about the costs for the new building, you would, likely be looking at new furnishings, but I'm not sure what the plans are for the existing building as well. I have a feeling with the new building, you'd be looking at making some areas maybe a little bit larger. So, in that sense, it would likely be more expensive to approach it that way. There are other approaches you can take. If, for instance, you were looking at, you could do like a roof garden type of a situation where you've got the smaller lifeguard, beach patrol building could be 1 story off the boardwalk elevated to meet flood regulations, but you could make it a roof garden type thing, and it, could be something that the public could enjoy on top of the building. That's an approach. Or, as the mayor mentioned earlier, it could be a more slender footprint that doesn't take up quite the width that what we're looking at now on Baltimore Avenue would be.
Thank you, Mike. Are you at the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Pretty much?
Mhm, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Certainly.
With that, let's go to, I guess, the feasibilities of relocation versus maintaining in place. We'll start with building and licensing. If you would share your perspectives on specific to flood zones, but anything else that you might notice.
Thank you, Mayor. So to speak directly to the flood zone, both locations are in the AE, the zone VE elevation 15, which would mean that given the 1-foot freeboard, we would need to have all mechanicals and the first floor at approximately an elevation of 16 feet. And that's taken 16 feet from the water surface and not necessarily from any surrounding grades. So you've got to imagine you have the water at a certain location, all the pertinent stuff would have to be above 16 feet at that point. So just because we have ground out there, maybe at an elevation of 5 to 10, doesn't mean we're coming up off 16 feet off of that. It would actually be taken from the water surface.
I could give you a little context on that. The floor elevation currently at the Baltimore Avenue restrooms is 14 feet.
The boardwalk elevation
Yes.
is 14 feet.
Well, the toilet room floors at the boardwalk is at building, the comfort station is at 14. The boardwalk itself.
Baltimore Avenue, restroom facilities, the floor is 14 feet elevation above the ocean. So let me talk this through. We just heard from Matt saying with the VE zone, the minimum elevation is 16 feet.
Be 15
So-
feet with 1 foot floor of freeboard, excuse me. 16 feet total, yes, sir.
15 feet.
Correct.
So if we rebuilt that existing building at Baltimore, tore it down and rebuilt it, the restroom floor would have to be at least 1 foot higher. Is that right?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
So that introduces a new problem in my mind of remodeling where you can retain the existing floor versus moving it to Maryland where you need to have it even higher, and therefore you need more handicap ramps, more steps. So not much, but still 1 foot can be significant.
And I'm not sure what the boardwalk elevation is in Maryland, but here it's pretty close to 13 feet.
13 feet at Maryland.
Yeah, well, at Baltimore, where we do have a survey, and that it's indicating 13 feet at the boardwalk, right in front of the building. It slowly slopes
Right.
up a little bit, but yeah.
Now, forgive me, I'm not familiar with all this, but earlier you said VE zone 16 feet above the ocean, but now you're saying 1 foot freeboard brings it to 15 feet. So to me, that's lowered.
Flip that around. You're at elevation VE 15 with a 1 foot freeboard. You would have to be at a minimum of 16 feet above that.
16. So 16, and the floor elevation now is 14. So if we rebuilt it, the floor would have to be 2 feet higher. Correct?
Approximately.
Okay, that's significant.
Maryland's
But
really
again,
close
if
to
you're
that.
starting brand new at Maryland, then maybe you can build that into it, so. But it is a concern. Any other concerns you want to point out?
Or let's talk about the determination of that. What determines the necessity to bring the entire structure, the entire structure up to compliance versus, just adding on to the existing structure? So the formula that FEMA is currently using is the market, let me find my formula here. It would be the cost of improvement for the project divided by the market value of the building. So I'm not sure if we've determined the market value of the building itself right now. And when we determine that, it's the building itself, not sidewalks, not landscape improvements, et cetera. So the building itself would have to be assessed at a certain value. Then that would be in relation to the improvement costs that are being presented. And if that does not eclipse 50%, we do not have to bring the entire structure up to FEMA code. If that eclipses 50%, the entire structure needs to come up to code. So I'm not sure if we've determined the building value at this point. So we would have to take a look at that to see the implications on Baltimore Avenue specifically. But we know that if we're building on Maryland Avenue, it would just have to be up to code completely, as there is no structure there. So to be able to determine what we can actually do to Baltimore, we would have to look at the current assessed value of that building only. Again, not the land involved, only the building.
And that would be market value of current structure?
That'd be correct, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Market value of current structure or proposed structure?
That would be the market value of the current structure in relation to the proposed costs.
Okay. Cost of improvement?
Cost of improvement, yes, sir.
Okay.
And that would include all materials, labor, built-in appliances, the overhead, the profit, and the repairs made to damaged parts of the building while under construction under the same application.
Anything else, Matt?
I believe that covers it, sir.
Very
Thank you.
good. Well, we thank you very much. With that, again, we're asking evaluations of the staff members. We'll go to Jeff Giles, Rehoboth Beach Patrol Captain. You've heard the different options, Jeff. If you could give us the perspective of the Beach Patrol and what your thoughts are on maintaining it in the same location versus relocation.
Yes, sir. I hope I'm on. There we go. Yes. Yeah, just looking at it practically as a lifeguard, and the Baltimore Avenue area that we are on Baltimore Avenue is like the center of the universe on the beach. We have 9 stands to the north and 9 stands to the south. It's the perfect location for us. As of this summer, there's paid lunches. So many of the guards come back to the shack, and we call it the shack, but it's headquarters. And they have lunch there. And then that Baltimore Avenue stand, and we sometimes have 2 stands set up, that is the middle of what we call the cover down. So if there's a issue at Hickman Street, then the guards will take from lunch. They'll run down onto the beach. They cover from Baltimore, and they just feed lifeguards toward Hickman Street. So it's sort of the center. So everything to the north stays the same, and to the south it goes. So Baltimore is always the center. If something happens at Henlopen, you're going to have the guards going to the Baltimore stand if they're up at headquarters, and they're going to start feeding themselves north, where everything stays the same in the south. So Baltimore Avenue for us is the center, and it's a good place to be. It's close. The guards are close to the stand there. They can get to it real quickly. You've maybe seen them this summer. We've had a lot of cover downs and EMT calls, and it's just it's a great location for us. Speaking of Maryland Avenue, it is a block further out of, it's not too far, but it's just north. But if we were going to be responding to calls from Maryland Avenue, they would obviously have a little bit longer run to get down to the stand, not that much. But it is, again, the center is at Baltimore for us.
Jeff, part of the reason for doing a second floor is to accommodate you all with an observation deck. What are the impacts on, I think we can infer, but what are the impacts, in your words, on moving north one block farther?
Yeah, again, we get a good look from Baltimore I can see up past the Henlopen, and I think when we move things up and being on a second floor or just at least 20 feet, 15 feet over where we are right now, you're going to be able to see all the way past Hickman Street and all the way past Henlopen. And I think we all know that is where the bulk of the people are at that are on the beach. And we can see and get a better observation on what we have. I tell you what we rely on right now. We have a computer at the front desk, and we go onto the Rehoboth cam, and it gives us an idea of how crowded the beach is. And it's going to be nice because I think we'll be able to utilize it with just our own eyes in time.
Okay, and I apologize, I didn't understand your answer with respect to looking south, moving one farther block north. Is that a significant impact?
I don't know if it would be significant. I think it'd be also how the location is, how far it's going to stick out from where it's at. You don't want a building blocking in your way. At Baltimore, we sort of really have an idea where it's at. I don't know how far out the building would be on Maryland to give us that look down the boardwalk. But again, it's just, from the center standpoint, Baltimore's really right in the middle.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Any questions of the Beach Patrol Captain, Commissioner Legree?
I think I'm hearing that Captain Giles felt like the observation deck was going to be a pretty good idea. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The observation deck was going to be a pretty good idea. And maybe I would like to ask him what he would think if we didn't build the tower up above, just had the observation deck on that second floor like we're talking about.
I think the height always gives you an advantage. You're just going to be able to see more things. I see it also as being an advantage on, like we do the polar bear plunge. There's other things that we do besides the lifeguarding where I think it would be an advantage to have a better look at what's happening and how crowded things are and so on. I mean, obviously, you could even set up a camera there in time for security purposes. So the higher you go, the better. I think it's just more practical. But at the same time, from what we have right now, we'll be happy to get on a ladder and stand it and get an idea of what we have. So, but it would be better. I think the higher we go, the better observation we'll have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Some of the other draft criteria, if you refer back to the guideline, and Patrick, I'll come to you in a second. If you refer back to the guideline embedded in the agenda, it says suggest some other draft criteria for evaluating these proposed relocations. Value in integrating a building with the Streetscape gateway from the Baltimore, from the boardwalk onto Baltimore. Aesthetics of the buildings, costs, funding availability, impact on timing, et cetera. Commissioner Gossett, go ahead.
Go back to Captain Giles for a moment. I heard you state that there's 9 north and 9 south stands based from Baltimore. But did I understand you to say that the bulk of the crowds are really north at Henlopen and Deauville? So there's a greater concentration there of actual guests on the boardwalk?
Yeah, just from overall calls with our EMT calls and looking at where our save data is from our saves and assists that we have in the ocean, majority of it is from the Henlopen to Hickman Street. South of Hickman Street, it is. We do have good crowds there, but we don't have the same amount of calls. We have less calls there, and same up toward Deauville, north of Pennsylvania Avenue. It's less calls. The bulk of the activity that we have with lost children, saves and assists, and EMT calls is between Hickman and Henlopen.
The Henlopen Hotel?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mike, you're fine. Jeff, you're fine. Matt, you're fine. With that, we'll turn it over to the commissioners for discussion and before we go to the public. Again, what we're evaluating here is whether or not to act on a recommendation by some, not all. We did not take a vote on the Wilmington Baltimore Task Force, and there was not even a majority that made these recommendations. Where they is a majority from the task force is saying we need to do something nicer, better to invite people off the boardwalk at Wilmington and Baltimore avenues. That is a main priority of the task force. So I'd like to open it up for discussions. Again, considering that it appears the costs are relatively comparable if we moved. The time frame, Mike, did you discuss time frame?
Did not, I
Is,
think.
what would be the impacts on that? If we want to realize the path we're on now, we would be able to construct it for summer of 2023. That is, have at the Baltimore facility, family restrooms, changing rooms, and a new beach patrol building with observation deck
That's correct.
by the summer of 2023, if on the path we are now. If we say, oh, let's start over and move it to Maryland or wherever, what does that do to their calendar?
So we would, right now, we've gone through a fair amount of floor plan evaluations, working with the existing building. So we're on track with this existing location for the dates that you mentioned. If we were to look at a new building, I think that all things equal, and we were just primarily looking at it through a staff level, we could potentially hit that same date. It would be a more crunched time frame. I think where we would exceed beyond that date is if we got into public workshops, that type of a process to go through a new building design, which I certainly wouldn't deny the value of that, but just so you know the difference between the approaches. But so that would delay it, I would say, a year to do the new buildings.
Very good, thank you. With that, let's open it up to the commissioners for discussion. Commissioner Legree.
Mayor, is the concern from the task force about opening it up, opening the Baltimore area to invite people off the boardwalk? Is it the mass of the building that we're proposing the objection?
I would say yes. Well, I'm sorry, the mass of the new building, or
Yeah,
I think it's just any building right there, especially if you compare it to what is at Wilmington Avenue right now, and compared to what is existing at Baltimore and what is proposed. The task force had not seen any of the massing pictures. In fact, they hadn't seen the floor plans because they were not available at that time. So they're just basing it on conjecture or what they believe could be realized there.
Okay, so if we said we'll just leave the Baltimore structure, renovate it, make it really nice, and think about building a satellite restroom somewhere north, probably wouldn't help matters as far as the invitation off the boardwalk.
Commissioner Sharnowski?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask, I'd like Mike to go back and show us the budget numbers, but first I'd like to ask Captain Giles about the disruption of their activities while we'd be renovating that building versus leaving that building and building a new one on Maryland. I'm assuming there's some benefit and there'd be less disruption in their activities.
Do you want to answer that, or do you want Mike to answer the construction timeline?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm assuming that we would start the construction process would start probably at the end of next September, and then it would be completed probably prior to the beginning of the next summer. So it really would not have much of an impact for us. We would, if we weren't able to use the building for a couple weeks, we would make do with meeting at the convention center, getting everything together, taking the Polarises up and working. So it doesn't sound like it would go through a summer process with the construction. So I don't think it would interfere with us.
That would mirror the construction timeline for the Delaware Avenue restrooms, by example. After the summer's over with, then we start demolition and construction with the goal to have that realized prior to summer of 2022. So you're right, Jeff, the same thing would happen for, you got to remember, it's not just the beach patrol, but it's the public restrooms we want to be able to provide and open timely also. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, the only comment I would have is, we really need to look at what the supply chain situation is like when we get to construction a year from now. I think it'd be difficult, the Delaware Avenue, we're doing changing stations primarily, so that's a relatively easy construction. If we were, back a couple of years ago, we shouldn't have any problem with the Baltimore Avenue proposal, but if we were to build in today's climate, I think we'd have a difficult time getting it done in 9 months.
Mike, could you scroll down to show the Maryland Avenue cost?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I'm going to ask a stupid question. If it cost 1.9 to build a new station and 2.1 or 2 to renovate, why aren't we just building a new? Why wouldn't the recommendation be demolish what's there and build a new station on Baltimore or Maryland?
Yeah, I don't think it's a stupid question. I mean, one difference is site work, and of course, we're just throwing numbers to some degree at it. As Commissioner Gossett mentioned, the change in elevation is a little bit shallower at Maryland, so I don't think we're going to have quite the same ADA needs and ramps and stairs there that we do at Baltimore. So that's one reason for the expense change.
Okay.
The other thing is, anytime you're dealing with plumbing in an existing building, you're dealing with a fair amount of expense there. So, we certainly would get into the FEMA regulations with a new building, and we do need to evaluate it even with this existing building based on the definition we've heard today. But it's not unusual for us when we're evaluating renovating new buildings versus renovating existing buildings versus building new, that oftentimes it's less expensive to build new.
And Mike, to my earlier comment about that, I agree that it helped me better understand this, that if we retrofitted Baltimore, we would be maintaining a lot of the existing plumbing, the fixtures, et cetera, or would we bring in all new plumbing, all new, from the meter pits forward, or would that just be retrofitting to existing waste and water?
Right, we're trying to maintain the chases the best we can. So, some of the plumbing piping, we're certainly hoping to reuse, but we're assuming all new fixtures would go into the facility.
But you are then working with placing the fixtures where existing fixtures are and what have you. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say again?
Replacing existing fixtures with new fixtures, but in their existing positions. So you're sort of limited of the type of expansion or growth that you can do. I mean, you've done a great job retrofitting that, but with a new design, you really can do what you want to do with a new building.
This is true, yes.
And I just remember back when we built the city hall, trying to operate, the initial thought was, well, we'll build half of it and work in half of it, move into the new half, and then build, tear down the old half and move into that when it's ready. And we made the decision to go to modular structures, tear the whole thing down and build strictly new. I just think, thinking along those lines of past experience, that moving into a new building with and built to today's standards, I mean, I think we still need to think about sea level rise that's coming in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, and a building that will meet the standards of those future. And we as a city set an example of how to do this, as opposed to just meet the existing standards. I think that's something that needs to be put into the mix in my thoughts anyway.
One thing I want to let you know, let you know is that the intent here for this building, wherever it is that it would be fully heated so that it's can be utilized year round. And one of the reasons for doing that is, of course, to accommodate the beach patrol, but also that if we wanted to allow other groups to use the little meeting room there, that's a possibility. But primarily, the family restrooms would be the only heated family restrooms in the city at outdoor public restroom facilities. And I think that's a bonus because the new family restrooms down at Delaware Avenue are not heated. Again, because we're intending to heat them at the Baltimore facility. As you know, there is no family restroom facility at all at the Baltimore Avenue restrooms, even though those restrooms are open year round. And so again, I'm looking forward. I think the city would enjoy having family restrooms that are heated and usable, accessible year round at the Baltimore facility. Well, nobody's offered anything yet. I guess where I am leaning, I'm not necessarily sold, but I understand the desire for having a terrific gateway to invite people off the boardwalk. It's a difficult situation at Baltimore, unlike Wilmington, that's a flat level area. Baltimore is a pretty steep incline from the boardwalk. I can see using signage and murals and different items or something to be able to attract people up the street. Unfortunately, Baltimore is not quite exactly like Baltimore or Wilmington in other respect, and that is standing on the boardwalk at Wilmington, looking westerly, you see on the left a restaurant and another restaurant. Then you see ice cream store, and on the right you see Gus and Gus, and you see Zogs, and you see another restaurant, and you see retail, and you see all these things. Whereas on Baltimore, even if we cleared away the facility, what you're seeing from the boardwalk is a hotel on the left, another hotel on the left, a hotel on the right, and it's doesn't have that same attractiveness. And I think there's ways, again, that I think we can utilize the gateway to help get people off there. So I'm a little unsettled on relocating this, also because I'm just excited about getting this ready and operational for the summer of 2023. So that's, I would not see splitting the facility into two and having beach patrol at Baltimore and a public facility at Maryland, because I think that then boogers up a second view shed from a residential street.
Mayor?
So, who's next? Commissioner Cluzy, go ahead.
On this, but do we have a timeline for the build on either one of these?
The timeline, Mike indicated they could roughly be the same, possibly.
Okay, so as far as having this in place by 2023, when would they break ground?
Well, that would be, say, September, bid or September, October 2022. Is that right,
Okay.
Mike?
That's right, yeah, as long as,
And this is based on how we are budgeting the project?
correct, yes.
Okay, not in terms of availability of contractors, et cetera. It's
Well,
more about-
that's the caveat. That's a big question mark. If we were to do this now, I would say no, we would not be able to build this in 9 months. So we really need to make sure that supply chain issues are resolved in order to make that schedule.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that input.
Well, and again, we are on a timeline that we've got designs, ready to go to engineering designs, I guess, at this point, because we've got the floor plan laid out. Whereas if we do start brand new, then we essentially are starting again. And while you're optimistic that, you can do that as an engineering company, I prefer be a little more realistic that it might take longer than we think. If there's no other opinions to be shared today, then we'll go to the public, come back to you. We've got Carol Everhart and Walter on the phone, and you want to say anything? Nope.
Yes, Mayor, this is Carol.
Yes, ma'am.
Very briefly, there's no argument at all that the amenities are certainly in need of upgrade. I think leaving the majority or putting heavy weight on what the lifeguards who are down there and Captain Giles, who is down there all the time, their opinion, I would put a lot of heavy weight on. Financially, that's up to you guys. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. Walter, are you on board? That's all the members of the public. Well, I was hoping we get a little more opinion, but we can say that this is an introductory discussion. Again, I don't want it to go too long because then it does eat into our timeline. Otherwise, we're going to have to be stagnant for a while. But if we put it again on our October workshop meeting, then we'll have be able to solicit opinions from two new commissioners, and I think that's a good thing. Is there any?
This is Walter. Did I get cut out?
Oh, you did. Go ahead, Walter.
All right, thank you. I want to say for Commissioner Gossett's especially responsible thoughts about sea level rise. I think it's two separate situations. Some of your own, Mr. Mayor, about the family restrooms, et cetera. I've not heard the word getting people off the boardwalk before, but I think it has to be separated from the lifeguards because providing a safe place is important. I have lent to Susan Gay, Commissioner Gay, previous, that there needs to be extensive discussion about putting some restrooms up at the Mariners Park area. I don't care what the people at the Henlopen. It's not a private town for them, but there needs to be some bathrooms. We have new emphasis and problems going up at the north end of the boardwalk. There needs to be places where people can go to the bathroom and take a break. But as it is now, we have people going to the bathroom with their families right out in the park. I don't believe that there needs to be more showers outside at Baltimore Avenue. I think showers are a separate situation. In front of the Henlopen condo complex at this point in time, there is quite a line at the narrowest end of the boardwalk for people taking showers late in the afternoon before they get back into their cars and buses and go away. But I do think there needs to be some emphasis and planning at the north end of the boardwalk. We have parking meter revenue coming in, and use some of that money for that and not just dump it into the canal at the dock. But I think you should continue the planning for the lifeguards. I think that's going to happen anyway. And I think that taking care of the other needs in bathrooms, but I don't think you can take care of all of them at one spot. And I do believe you shouldn't hesitate if you're going to build it all there, take the street end back 20 foot so you have room for it all. But keep up the good discussion because there have been very good questions brought forward and the questions about tear it down and build it all new. And I leave one last thing. When we worked on this many years ago, I suggested putting prison-type plumbing in this building so that it would be less destructible, because Chuck could tell you the stories about how things are torn down. There's a way of doing it, and there's a way of doing it right, and I encourage you to do it right. Thank you for the opportunity for input, and keep up the good thinking.
Thank you, Walter. Any further comment from the commissioners?
Mayor, I've got a couple, and I'll try to be brief. But Mike, if you could answer this question, we've spent a great deal of money already on the design and looking at the current facility and whatever engineering and architectural diligence you've gone through. If we were to start from scratch and look at something on Maryland Avenue, not included in this construction budget amount, I'm assuming there's more design costs in that?
There would be, yes. Yeah, at least we've gone through the programming. We know what, essentially what the city wants for comfort station needs, and we know what the beach patrol needs for their needs. So we've gone through that exercise, but we would need to look at more concepts and massing before we move forward.
Okay, and if I could ask your opinion on what I heard from Matt on whether we had to be code compliant on with FEMA. In his explanation, it sounds to me as if we need to be code compliant renovating at Baltimore Avenue. I think it was a 50% of the current value divided by the construction cost, and land not included, that current building is not worth $1.1 million. What are your thoughts, and why is it not included in the construction cost here?
Yeah, I think it's a discussion we'll need to have. Looking at the definition, I'm not certain if you can separate out that first floor and just look at the renovations related to the first floor. If you have to look at the entire building. And if it is the entire building, I think we would exceed those dollar values. And then I don't know if for emergency purposes with municipalities, if there's any exemptions. I think we would need to look into all those things before a final decision's made.
This is Matt again, Mike and Commissioner. Sorry to interrupt here. I have a FEMA document pulled up. The last sentence pertains exactly to how do you determine that, or the last paragraph. For the purposes of determining substantial improvement, market value pertains only to the structure in question. It does not pertain to the land, landscaping, or detached accessory structures on the property. Any value resulting from the location of the property should be attributed to the value of the land, not the building. So again, we would be looking at strictly the building that is existing now and what its market value would be.
Yeah, and that's how I understood it to be, and when you explained it before, and I think that's going to trigger what the current value is and what we'd be spending on this renovation. I don't see how you can argue that we don't need to be in compliance with FEMA with that. My last comment, Mayor, I've got many others, but since we're going to be discussing this again, but my thought on moving it to Maryland, building new sounds fantastic to me, and I think there's a lot of benefits to that. However, one thing we've not talked about here is the fact that Baltimore is a mostly commercial street and Maryland Avenue is mostly a residential street, and putting, I think, restrooms at the end of that is going to cause some real concern for residents on that street, whereas not so much on Baltimore. I'll reserve the rest of my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I agree with your one thought there on the impacts on the residential street, especially because I used to live on Maryland Avenue until less than a year ago. Any further Commissioner comments?
Yes, Commissioner, Patrick Gossett here. I think to take a couple steps back here in the sense that, in my view, the CDP is our guiding document of how the city will evolve over the years to come. And in the CDP, current CDP, it currently calls out for investigation of streetscape improvements on Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues. And I think that, you know, when the new CDP is presented, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, there may be some updates to that vision, if you will. But I think if we were to go the course we are currently and leaving the building where it is and improving it, that would just put a blockade right at the entrance to Baltimore Avenue as it looks from the boardwalk back. Now, you speak, Mayor, about, you know, currently there's a hotel and this type of thing, but you look 5 to 10 years from now, I mean, we have an open parking lot behind Carlton's, which has just recently been sold. We're not sure what's going to be developed there. The Lord Baltimore at 16 Baltimore Avenue has been in that way conditions for many, many years. That's prime for redevelopment at some point. Across the street, Mr. Langford, you know, has announced plans for a new hotel, which will move Eden, and JM will be most likely raised to expand the hotel. He also owns the old church across the street, which, you know, the tenant there is a 5-year lease, so that probably will be redeveloped. So I think we need to also look beyond 3, 5, 10 years from now, the potential of Baltimore Avenue. And if this building is reconstructed there, that certainly would hamper the view or the vision or the development, future development of Baltimore, along with Wilmington Avenue. We have a clear view shed from the boardwalk back through Wilmington. And as you mentioned, there's retail, there's restaurants and what have you. And Baltimore has that potential. The second block of Baltimore is certainly developed that way currently and has potential for further development. But I think we really have to use the CDP as our guiding doctrine for the development of the city, and think about, you know, the impacts of building this building right now, this year or the next 2 years, of 5 and 10 years of the development of Baltimore Avenue for the potential of retail, of possibly new hotels, of who knows what's going to be there. So I really think it's a balance that we really need to look at. And the schedule being driven is, yes, we have plans ready and shovel ready in some regards, but how does that, you know, I think that's a very small percentage in the equation of what that view shed is going to look like in 5 to 10 years from now. So I'm excited to look at the new CDP when it's available to see if it's addressed Baltimore and Wilmington any further for future developments or what have you. But I just caution us of making such a major impactful building at the viewshed of Baltimore when there's so much potential in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years for that whole block of Baltimore. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I don't agree with you totally on that, but partially. I don't think that, in fact, there are some things that I would like to see us work on, taking a look at architectural review, taking a look at requiring commercial buildings to have retail on the first floor, and there's things like that. But I think they can all be done independently of this particular project, and I don't think we need to hold up to see what the CDP is going to have or to act on anything in the CDP. Having a hold on this particular project. So I don't agree with you fully there. What I'd like to say is if there's no more comments, we'll take this up again at our October meeting. I would love to have a vote on which way to go by October regular meeting, but it's more important to deliberate and concentrate on what the pros and cons of this are. Even though we're going to stall the project at this point, just understand that we're on hold until we make this decision. Otherwise, we don't want to invest in Mike in any more engineering, so we'll do that. If there's any further questions, if not, I want to thank Beach Patrol Captain Jeff Giles, Mike Wigley, Matt Janis, and all those that participated in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to announce that Jean Lee was here. Her topic is solid waste recycling, etc. I'm going to put that last on the agenda so that if we don't get to it, then we'll continue with that in October meeting. If we have time, we can call her back and continue with that discussion. Evan, are they on board? What I'd like to do also, again, is exercise the mayoral prerogative and go to the next item of business because we have people waiting with the CTC Inc., the city's wireless consultant. And they're going to, that'll be the next topic before we get back on schedule. And they're going to include an introductory discussion, including review of city wireless code, review of city's wireless design guidelines, and an introductory analysis of proposal by Verizon to install wireless antennas along the west side of the boardwalk. If you recall, it was probably I need help with timeline, probably 2-3 years ago that we started developing our own wireless code. We hired a Cohen group that helped us with that. About a year or so after adopting, a year and a half after adopting that wireless code and design guidelines, we amended it. We had a hearing and we amended those codes and the design guidelines. And after that, we had discussion of Verizon's permit applications. Thank you, Mike. To install antennas on the east side of the boardwalk on light poles. Since then, they ran into a little snag, and we suggested, how about looking at installing poles on the west side, and how would that work and look? And so that's where we're at now, is acting on recommendations by the commissioners at a meeting, I guess 2, 3, 4 meetings ago. They suggested that we hire a independent professional wireless consultant, and that's how we ended up with CTC. Evan, do you want to introduce anything further?
No, Mayor, I don't have anything further to add, but on the line is Julie Lias with CTC, so I think she's just going to provide you with a brief overview of what they're hoping to accomplish. So turn it over to you, Julie.
Very good. Thank you, Julie. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, and thank you all for allowing me to join you today. I'm very excited to be working with you all. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to turn my video off here so that you can focus on the PowerPoint and not my face, since that's the more important information, of course. So, all right. Do you all see the front page of the PowerPoint?
Yes, go ahead. And a reminder to the commissioners that while we're doing screen sharing, I can't see everybody. So if you have a question and can't hold it till the end, please just shout out your name and I'll recognize you. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Julie.
All right. As Mayor Mills already mentioned, we were brought on to help the city of Rehoboth with their small wireless facilities, both their ordinance design guidelines and help you with processing applications themselves. I want to give you a little bit of a background on CTC Technology and Energy. We've been in business for over 35 years with a lot of experience in engineering, policy, business planning. We only work for governments and public entities, never the industry themselves. Many of our clients are states, local governments, universities. We work for major cities such as Pittsburgh, other waterfront cities such as Seattle, beachfront towns such as Dewey Beach, just to the south of you, as well as, of course, Rehoboth Beach. We are, as I mentioned, completely independent from the telecommunication carriers and the cable industry. We sit on your side of the table to fight for you and work to put you in the best position possible. We're here to help you develop the tools so that you don't just have to listen to the industry. We're here to fight for you and to fight to protect Rehoboth and the brand of Rehoboth, your streetscapes. Unfortunately, the FCC has made it as difficult as possible, especially where small wireless facilities are concerned. But, you know, well, we're not miracle workers, but again, we are here to fight for you and to put your best interests forward. I wanted to give the commissioners a brief overview of the scope of work that we were hired to do in case you weren't all fully aware. We have sort of three main tasks here. The first is what I'm here to present our initial findings on, is a technical and strategic guidance looking towards revisions and future amendments to your small cell ordinance. I think as Mayor Mills highlighted, you have some really strong documents in place already that I know have been reviewed at least once already, I think you mentioned, but the small cell ordinance in particular, I think is the one that we were hired to do and to really beef up and look at more closely. The second task is actually helping you with the reviewing applications, such as a proposal from Verizon or other future one-off applications for individual sites. And then the third task is other additional services that we can provide for you with our engineering and policy and technical background, such as, again, reviewing the Verizon proposal that you've already received. The good news is, as I mentioned, your existing ordinance and design guidelines are in really strong shape. A number of items that we at CTC tend to suggest to our clients to add or amend to their existing ordinance, you guys already have in place and in a really strong way. Here's just 5 examples of things, and I'll go through them really quickly. Clearly differentiated requirements based on the types of structures. So differentiating between a monopole or a really tall tower versus a non-tower installation. Again, that's the language that you all are using. Non-tower would be something along the lines of a utility pole or on top of a building or in a water tank. And then again, differentiating both of those to a small wireless facility. And in particular, the small wireless facility installations, you differentiated using the federal definition, which is really great. It means that there are less complications between ensuring compliance of an installation between the federal definition and your local definition. You've made it easier for yourselves off the bat in that way. So that's really, really great. The other federal definition that you've already incorporated, again, really strong, really important, is this idea of substantial change, which is known as a 6409, which is just the number of the act that the FCC put in place to establish this. The substantial change is one of those things the FCC did that made it harder for locations to really dictate what and how things are installed. But the fact that you've already incorporated that into your regulations means that it's already something that you're paying attention to and keeping in mind when an application or a new permit comes in for proposed installation. Some other things that you've got in place already that are really strong. You have the same height restrictions already in place for new poles that would be installed and replacement poles. Again, it's just reducing complication. You've already sort of thought those things through ahead of time. Antenna standards are absolutely stellar. Pretty much cover everything that we normally would suggest a location include. Those include things like the volume of the antenna, how big it can be, the placement, where it can be, how high up it should be compared to the street itself, for example, public safety interference, shrouding and concealment. All of those things are all things that we normally advise our clients to make sure are included based on their preferences, and you've already got a lot of that in place, which is awesome. Additionally, wiring concealment standards. This is something that we love to see because I think it really cleans up installations and make things look a lot neater when you're talking about something on the street. Not a lot of places think this far ahead and think this through as well, and it's really fantastic to see that you've already got regulations in place saying, you know, wiring on the pole aesthetics already are in place so that if you've got an antenna at the top, all of the wiring must be concealed within a conduit or a shroud of some way so that you don't just have something on top of the pole with wires sticking out of it all over the place. Now, overall, the most important thing to keep in mind as well is that strong regulations like the ones that you do already have are really important to help avoid state preemption. For locations whose standards aren't in as good of shape as what you already have in place, state laws can preempt the local rules, sort of overriding your local preferences. And the great news is you don't have that. You're really well set for that. So having said all of that, there are, of course, a couple of areas that we saw that we thought could be improved. These are sort of the 3 major buckets that we have to talk about. The first process, this really sort of goes towards that task 2 that we were hired to help you with. And and really are looking towards streamlining your process, making things as clear as can be, and making sure that the burden of proof is very much put on the applicant and not on you. So starting with differentiating applications based on the type of installation. So if it is a new structure versus the modification of an existing facility, differentiating those from the get-go means that for these other 3 bullet points, for example, you have a lot clearer differentiation between what must be submitted by the applicant for a proposed installation for a permit, when and under what circumstances justification documentation should be submitted. And of course, very importantly, for setting fees, having differentiation between application types means that you can recoup fully the costs for reviewing, for example, a brand new installation where no pole already exists, which might take more time to review all of the documentation that you need versus the modification of an existing facility where a carrier might just be swapping out an existing antenna for a new antenna. Again, moving on to the justification piece here, which I know is something that I've spoken with some of the members of the Rehoboth Beach team already as something that you were concerned about. It's definitely something that we would suggest, which is, there's different ways to frame this, either justification documentation, could be proof or evidence, but what's important here is to include a provision that says that if a applicant is applying for a permit for something that doesn't comply with the city standards, they need to provide justification for why that is, be it because of technical infeasibility. In other words, where you, Rehoboth, would like them to put their antenna is technically infeasible to meet the coverage or capacity needs that they're trying to meet. Why an applicant isn't going to co-locate their antenna, for example, on a Delmarva power pole. They need to provide documentation from Delmarva stating their denial for why the carrier couldn't go on that existing pole in that regard. Again, those are very easy things, but again, are things that we saw were not quite as clearly laid out within your existing ordinance for small cells. And then, as I just mentioned, setting fees. You do have a very clearly defined fee schedule, but it can be set to more fully recoup the costs of reviewing applications, proposed installations, doing site visits, all of the work that you and we will do to help review all applications for wireless facility installations. And importantly, we can help with establishing a fee program that can be reevaluated on an annual basis so that as applications come in over the course of time, you have fees that do truly adjust on an annual basis based on the true cost to review or all applications in that way. Speaking of setbacks, in terms of areas of improvement, we see a number of locations like to include a setback provision for example, distance setback from a curb or a roadway or residential or commercial dwellings. And just these are things to think about and talk about internally as to what your preferences are for those things. The last one is one that we'll definitely sort of strongly recommend, and I'm going to come back to as well, which is a setback distance between or other wireless facilities, small wireless facilities in particular. The idea there being that if one small wireless facility is already in place, there's a certain distance that must be met between that existing one and the new proposed one. I'll come back to more detail on that a little bit later. And our third bucket, pardon me, would be talking about aesthetics, which is going to be sort of the main thrust of what we sort of found was could be shorn up within your existing design guidelines and ordinance itself. In particular, with the idea in mind of removing subjectivity. I believe your existing design guidelines state that all installations should be made as unobtrusive as possible. Replacement poles need to be of comparable materials and designed to the existing pole and won't deviate from the predominant pattern of the existing structures in place, which is great. Those are the kinds of things that we'd like to see, but in particular also new pole installations, we found, I think your existing design guidelines seem to sort of focus on new utility poles, which would therefore be implied to be wooden, or decorative poles, and the ability to sort of talk about new replacement decorative pole aesthetics, but there don't seem to be clear standards set for new decorative non-utility poles. So removing subjectivity, why is that important? You want to remove subjectivity in particular so that when you approve an installation, it is because of certain characteristics, be it the materials of a pole, appearance such as the pole itself is tapered from bottom to top, or vice versa, if that's your preference, or fluted in appearance, that the height of the new pole will be within a certain variance, let's say, you know, within 10% of other existing structures on that street, that the appearance overall looks similar to other poles nearby, if those are your preferences, that optional lights be included or not included, again, based on your preferences. Again, the reason this is important because it helps to protect you when the next application comes along. You know, the applicant can't come along and say, well, you approved the first one, so you have to approve mine too at this location. You have that justification yourselves to say, well, we approved the first one because of these characteristics. And therefore, if your characteristics are completely not matching our preferences, we don't have a basis to approve yours. We have our own basis, and you have to comply with our rules or demonstrate, again, with that justification documentation I mentioned earlier, why you absolutely cannot meet our preferences. And again, sort of going back to that federal definition I mentioned earlier of 6409 substantial change, having these having your approval based on specific standards, that removal of subjectivity is really important when we're talking about substantial change protection. If you are not as fully aware of what the sort of substantial change provisions are from the FCC, they put into place this rule that basically said that locations cannot block and in fact must approve applications for the modification of existing sites, except in certain circumstances, one of which, and I think this is going to be one of the most important ones for Rehoboth, is except for circumstances when the modification proposed does not comply with the conditions associated with the original approval. So again, as I was just mentioning, if the original approval was made because the proposed installation is made to look like a decorative light in a particular way, such as, for example, I believe the decorative light pole installation that's on Rehoboth Avenue, sort of in the center of town near where the bandstand is, you can't have, I think it's AT&T has that one. AT&T can't come in and totally remake the way that looks and say, well, the substantial change provision says you can't deny this. You can come back and say, well, this was approved because it looks like this. It has the decorative light. It's got the two pedestal lights coming off of the center. If you're going to upgrade your equipment, that's fine, but it must remain looking like this. They can't sort of just remake the installation there and say that we can't complain because of the 6409 provisions there. Something to keep in mind with all of this, as I just mentioned, is you were not going to be able to block entirely the installation of these by the FCC. Like I mentioned, they made it really hard for locations to completely block these or put in place roadblocks to keep these from going in. The best thing that you can do is have a set of rules that nudge the industry in the directions that you are hoping to achieve, which is, again, what we're here to help you sort of work through what your preferences are in that way. So a brief overview again of what aesthetics really mean, what these subjectivity options could include. There's a lot of items here on the slide. I don't need to go in depth into all of them, but just to give you a brief overview, what are aesthetics? There are things that include everything on the screen right now, the size of your antennas, volume, dimensions, and the accessory equipment as well. The painting of attachments and shrouds to match the existing structure or the new structure being put in place. It could also include things like the material that the pole is made of, be it wood or be it metal. If you want to include a street light, be it decorative or not decorative, more functional based. Would you like all installations to be put on existing street structures or replacing existing street structures before new things are put in place? That goes towards here, consistency with the character of a neighborhood, which I think is going to be one of the biggest things I know is concern for the Board of Commissioners and I'm sure the population of Rehoboth overall. And again, that minimum spacing item there, which goes to the question of setbacks between different installations of antennas. One thing in particular to note, and I'm going to talk about this more as we go through, but when we talk about the concealment of accessory equipment or the placement of accessory equipment, be it on the pole, be it on the ground next to the pole, be it concealed within the pole, it's important to keep in mind that if your preference is to install or replace existing wooden utility poles, you cannot conceal cabinetry, equipment's radio within a wooden pole. You just can't do it, of course. It's a pole, it's a wood pole. You would have to either mount that on the pole itself or on the ground next to the pole or at the base of the pole, but those can't be concealed in the way that some of the pictures I'm going to show you here in a moment might show. So again, I've got a couple of slides here briefly just to give the board a couple of, put in your mind what these things could look like in a variety of different ways, aesthetically speaking. Here's a couple of examples of standalone poles. One of these is probably going to look very familiar. I believe it's installed at the corner of First and Wilmington there, where I think the carrier came in and, do I have my laser pointer? Yes, right here, the carrier came in and replaced an existing stop sign. You can see that the cabinetry is both on the pole up above where the sort of eye line of somebody walking down the street would be, as well as perhaps in the pedestal, the base of the pole here. Here's another example from another location similarly, where you have the cabinetry is up on the pole, but above the line of sight of people walking on the street with your antenna canister up here at the top. And here's two examples of when you have all of that cabinetry installed or concealed within the base of the pole. And here's sort of a design picture showing what that looks like, more technically speaking, what all the different pieces might look like. You can also have decorative poles. Again, picture here is probably going to look very familiar. This one over here on the left being the installation on Rehoboth Avenue. You have a number of other decorative pole or decorative light options here from other locations around the world, around the country. And here on the right, I believe is a proposed design. I'm not sure if it was approved or not in Ocean City, Maryland, just south of you all as well. To give you a sense of what some of these might look like, even on the boardwalk itself or along the boardwalk. Other options, of course, are streetlight poles. More parking streetlight poles is the way I like to think of it. It's not necessarily a technical term of art, but it's how I like to think of the difference between streetlight poles or decorative lights. Again, different examples here where you have the cabinetry concealed within the base of the pole and your antenna up here at the top. Here's another sort of more real world example of that. There's another example where you have the cabinetry up on the pole, but again, sort of out of the line of sight of people walking on the street itself. A city example where you again have the equipment concealed within the cabinet. And here's an example where you have the cabinet on the ground next to the pole with the standalone pole here with the antenna at the top as well. One thing that I think might be worth considering as well for Rehoboth, knowing that the overall character and aesthetics of the boardwalk area is so very important to the character of the town, the brand of Rehoboth, right? Excuse me. In terms of coming up with these new standards or setting these standards, aesthetically speaking, that you might want to consider putting together a set of pre-approved pole types. So that, for example, if you're looking at a streetscape or an end of street near the boardwalk where there are existing wooden utility poles where an antenna can be co-located on top of, a carrier must do that first and demonstrate why that would not be technically possible before they can go ahead and install a brand new pole in that particular streetscape. However, if you're talking about a particular end of street area where there are no poles in existence and you would have to put something new in place, it would have to meet a certain set of characteristics that could be set in certain areas, certain neighborhoods, depending on whatever your preferences are. You could almost imagine a map being put together that has certain pre-approved pole designs in certain areas along the boardwalk or at the ends of certain streets along the boardwalk and then throughout town, depending on what your preferences might be in that regard. Again, something to keep in mind here is that where no poles exist currently and a new pole would need to be put in place, you have complete control over what that new pole would look like. And at the moment, your design guidelines do not really address what that new pole preference would look like. There's a number of ways that you can put in place, again, design or aesthetic standards, as I've been going on about for like the last 5 or 10 minutes. But other things to keep in mind too is that you have the option to potentially limit the number of locations where brand new poles would go into place by forcing co-location of carriers all on the same pole. Or another option is to address the idea of these new pole installations by creating sort of a new sense of uniformity. We actually saw this when we were working with Seattle, the city of Seattle, for their waterfront rules and installations, where they knew that these installations were going to need to be put in place, and the way that they addressed that was bringing the carriers to the table, and everyone agreed on one specific design that was brand new and didn't necessarily look like anything else that was already in place, but that every new installation that was going to go up along their waterfront had to look like that design. And so everything moving forward, it created this sense of uniformity moving forward, although it was a new uniformity that didn't necessarily exist previously. Which sort of turns us to, of course, the Verizon proposal that we have looked at. In particular, when we look at the Verizon proposal, in light of all of the rest of what I've been going through here, if you ask, do we like the proposal? Yes or no. You could say yes, you could say no, but the better question there is why? Because that is what other carriers are going to try and replicate moving forward. So, to that end, speaking of the Verizon proposal, we reviewed the proposal information that we received, which again is sort of a map with location information and some photo simulations of where these might go moving forward. Without more information concerning coverage, concerning construction or structural information, concerning the RF emissions, et cetera, we can do a much more thorough analysis of the proposal with more information. But in terms of what we've received so far, we reviewed this through 2 main lenses. One would be compliance. How is it compliant or not with both local or federal regulations? And to the best we can tell from what we've received thus far, it does seem to be compliant with existing local regulations and the federal regulations as well. Second lens that we looked at this is there a more preferable location, or could it be made more aesthetically pleasing in any one of these locations? And the answer to that is probably. Again, depending on what your preferences are for the city and for your boardwalk area. Generally speaking, we can make suggestions on how to help with this, but the best way to address these is, again, removing subjectivity from your design standards. If you have rules in place, it protects you so that everything moving forward is the best case scenario with your preferences taken into consideration. So I went ahead and took just 3 examples from the Verizon proposal to give you a sense of some of these suggestions for aesthetics that could be put in place, ways to think about the wide variety of rules that could be taken into consideration or put in place. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but to just give you a sense with a real world example here. This is one of the proposed locations at Virginia Avenue. It's the end of the street at a location where you have decorative lights on the east side of the boardwalk, but also these 2 decorative lights here on the west side at the edge of the street. Verizon is proposing to install this new standalone pole that is tapered to seemingly match the existing decorative poles, but with this large antenna canister put in place here at the top. Again, so this is a new pole location. You have complete control over what that new pole might look like. This could be one of those instances where a question of new uniformity could work really well. You could see an example where instead of an installation that looks like this, can you see my cursor? Sorry, as I'm pointing here, just want to make sure. Yes, okay, good. instead of a new installation here that has this sort of large canister at the top, perhaps you come up with a new decorative design that, while it doesn't exactly match these existing lights here, but for the west side of the boardwalk where you could replace an existing decorative light with another decorative structure that looks similar, seems to be sort of along the same aesthetic feel. Certainly it wouldn't match exactly, but it would be new, but could be replicated then for all of these installations all the way along the boardwalk. So every street end where an antenna would be put in place, you have this decorative light that looks a little bit nicer. Sure, it doesn't exist currently, but every street is going to have the same look at the end of the street when you get to the boardwalk in that way. Something to consider. I'm not saying that's the preferred thing or what we think is the best per se. It's truly an aesthetic and a personal preference in that regard. Here's another example, very much sort of along that same vein. This is at the end of Norfolk Street, where Verizon is proposing to install a new wooden pole to co-locate their antennas on top of, because again, no pole exists currently in that area. This existing decorative pole, I believe, is on the east side of the boardwalk, so it's not that could be replaced with this new sort of uniform look. However, you could, it's a debate. All of, aesthetics really is a debate at the end of the day with a lot of these things. But something, again, you could see how an installation put in place at the end of the street near this pavilion structure that would match another more decorative structure that's put in place at the end of other streets up and down the boardwalk could create, again, sort of that sense of uniformity, a sense of aesthetics that matches your brand, your character at the street end, perhaps that you would prefer more than this new wooden pole. Having said that, I know Verizon made this suggestion of this new wooden pole because when you are standing at the boardwalk looking down the street, this pole matches other wooden utility poles that are further down the street, so that when you're looking from the boardwalk down the street, it matches sort of the overall character of the neighborhood in that regard. And these are the preference questions, the trade-offs that you have to think about as we work through the question of what your aesthetic and design preferences really are. Here's another example that sort of highlights exactly that a little bit further. I believe Verizon at the end of Brooklyn Avenue proposed to install this new wooden pole because Delmarva Power said that this pole was not acceptable due to being a primary power pole or something along those lines. When you look down the street from this view, you can see that this new wood pole does seem to match those other poles, both in terms of sort of height and the color and the look overall. But again, if we're thinking about sort of potentially creating a new uniformity or a new look for the area, perhaps replacing this decorative light with a different structure that again would match the structure at the end of every other street, it's something to consider. You also have the option, of course, to say that perhaps in a location where there are no other poles this close to the boardwalk, you do want this sort of new decorative structure idea, but in a place where you have a wooden pole this close to where the edge of the boardwalk is, you actually would prefer to have a new wood pole be put up because it looks a lot closer to what else is along the street. Again, these are all things to think through as we talk about this. One thing that I'm sure is probably on some of your minds that I know I've obliquely referenced already is the idea of co-location, where multiple carriers might co-locate on the same structure. Generally speaking, co-location has sort of two different definitions, but they both mean kind of the same thing. Both means to add antennas to a support structure, that's just the co-location of antennas, or to co-locate your antennas on a support structure with someone else's antennas. Both of those have pretty much the same definition there, but that's what co-location really means. That's what we're talking about with that. There are pros and cons certainly to the idea of co-locating multiple carriers on the same structure. You'll certainly see this frequently when we're talking about tower structures, tall monopoles, large utility transmission towers, where you see multiple arrays of carrier antennas all co-located on the same structure. They will tend to need to be quite a bit taller as a result of that. I think the question here from conversations we've already had is a question of co-location versus potential proliferation, right? Does having, not saying you want these taller poles and you want to co-locate as many carriers as possible within town mean that you're going to suddenly have 3 or 4 poles put up at the end of every street in order to support the boardwalk? Well, one way to deal with this, at least for now, is coming back to that question of setbacks here, is to put in place a rule that says that a installation of a small wireless facility must be at least 300 feet from another installation, except for in a situation where they are co-located on the same support structure. So for example, if this antenna installation is already in place somewhere in town by, let's say, for example, Verizon, if AT&T or T-Mobile wants to come in at the end of this same street and put up their antennas, the rule would be that the new installation must be at least 300 feet from this pole, wherever this pole may be, unless AT&T or T-Mobile wants to put their antennas also on this same pole. And part of that also includes, of course, the idea that if you want to install a new pole, it must be built to accommodate more than one carrier. The downside to the nudging carriers towards co-location, first of all, is they're definitely going to fight that. It is all carriers are going to want to have as much control as possible over their own support structures and installations. It's easier for them when it comes to maintenance and adjusting of their installations. It's certainly less costly, a lot less coordination needed between different carriers when they both have antennas on the same structure versus having their own structure with their own antennas. When we talk about aesthetics of co-location, there's other concerns that you should definitely keep in mind as well. The pole itself is going to have to be taller. Each array of antennas needs about 5 feet or more. So multiple carriers, you're going to need potentially 15 feet or more above the utility lines. This is another photo from the photo sim of the location at the end of, oh goodness, I think this was Brooklyn. Yes, I think this is at the end of Brooklyn. It's right by Funland, I know that. So you could sort of, picture where if this pole was in place and you want to nudge the carriers towards co-location, you would need to have a much taller pole that goes much higher up here in order to accommodate all of the carriers on the same pole. So when we're talking about aesthetics, you also have few tall trees towards the end of these streets down by the boardwalk. Which means that these taller poles are going to stick out up into the sky more, for better or worse. Those are aesthetic concerns for you to consider. And so, this is this ultimate question here that I've listed here at the bottom of the slide. At the end of the day, is the second pole in this location better or worse than increasing the height of the first to accommodate everyone on the same structure? We can give you pros and cons again of both, but at the end of the day, it is what does Rehoboth prefer for what their streetscapes are going to look like? And again, for now, one way that we can help to protect against this is creating those setback rules so that one facility must be at least 300 feet from the next one, which will also nudge carriers most likely to co-locate their first pole the next street over instead of adding the second pole to the same end of street for exactly that reason of having to be 300 feet from the next closest wireless facility. That gives you at least a little bit of breathing room while we figure out the next phase of these design preferences in that regard, right? Overall, in terms of sort of next steps, what comes next, we at CTC can take on the first round of revisions, edit suggestions to help remove subjectivity from the design guidelines and to put some new rules into place. It's definitely something to stay on top of though, as a city over time as your streetscapes evolve, as you redevelop certain areas, certain neighborhoods, as technology evolves. It's something you're going to want to stay on top of to continue to remove that subjectivity from your existing guidelines and protect the brand that is Rehoboth, how you want your streets to look in that regard. As I mentioned before, you're not going to be able to block these. So the best thing that you can do is to have a set of rules that nudge the industry in the direction of what you are hoping to achieve. The good news, such as it is that almost everything that sort of needs to be worked out or talked about is aesthetic. Bad news is almost everything to be talked about, again, is aesthetic. So further next steps involve discussions both internally with you, Rehoboth, on what your preferences would be. We're happy to be part of those conversations to help guide you on pros and cons in different directions. And then the third sort of next step, as these rules are put in place and we get these set up, is to continue to work on the actual application process and start to take that on your behalf to help review applications for their technical and aesthetic standards. Any questions?
Thank you, Julie, very much. I'd like to make everybody aware that we only contracted with CDC a short few weeks ago, and they were very gracious in expediting their analysis of our code design standards and analysis of Verizon's Westerly proposal. So this meeting was intended really just as an introductory meeting with them. We are intending to bring them back again, likely at the October workshop meeting. So we recognize that if you have questions, we'd certainly like you to ask them now, but also recognize that if they're unable to answer them at this point, that they'll bring them back again to a future meeting. With that, let's go to commissioner discussion. We've got Commissioner Gay and then Legree and then Richard Byrne. Commissioner Gay, go ahead.
First of all, thank you. This was an excellent presentation. I have one question I'll get to in a minute, but before that, I just want to say I made some notes about, I think that Julie identified, the very issues that I have been concerned about with this ordinance since it was passed about 2 years ago, and that is namely the fee structure and the aesthetics. And I really felt like we were giving too much away, especially with aesthetics and proposals that were coming in. And I understand we are limited in what we can do with given FTC regulations, but I from what she presented, I was very relieved to know that we can make a difference and we can set standards. In fact, the reason to set the standards, to protect us for the future, to remove the subjectivity, to protect our brand, all are just really important to me. And I was also glad on the one question I have, I guess, about the fees, and I'm glad to know that we can update them because I firmly believe we should recoup our costs. I don't want to see, taxpayer money paying for this. Are there, I guess, first of all, do we need to do that in the near term? Do we need to set specific fees, I assume, and not have, ranges for different types, but are there limits to what we can do, or can we set it based on the cost of this review process that they're now going to help us with? So that's one question. What kind of flexibility do we have on fee structure?
Happy to take that if
sure, go ahead.
That works. Yes. So the FCC has set up basic standard limits on what can be charged for applications and for review processes, unless a location can demonstrate that they are setting those standards to recoup costs. So in other locations where we have worked with the location to increase those fees to truly cover those costs, what typically we will do is we have sort of an estimated amount of time it takes for us to do every step of a review process of an application, at least with what we typically are asked to do. Which could increase or decrease depending on if there are other tasks that you'd like us to do or other things that you are already very well set up to take care of yourselves, right? So what we typically will do, at least at the start, is we will work with you on how much time it will take for you to review an application, how much time it takes for us to do it, and we'll put together an initial cost per application of how much we think would cover those fees. Hopefully we do a really good job of estimating that at this point. We're pretty decent at this point. we come pretty close. One thing to keep in mind is these cannot be money-making opportunities for you. They can only recoup the cost of doing this work. So typically what we will do, we will put in place a fee structure with your consultation that, again, hopefully is approved by your board and by the location. And we'll monitor it over the course of a year or so. And then at the end of the year, part of putting that fee structure in place to begin with is we can then evaluate even on a per application basis or per application type is actually even easier because the fees are going to be set by application type. So if it takes, on average, 10 hours of review time between the city of Rehoboth and the CTC to review one application, we estimate the hourly cost to do so and see, does that cost actually match up to what we're charging? And if yes, we did a great job. And if no, you can adjust as need be on a regular basis. And that gives you sort of that, I don't want to say it meets that burden of proof of demonstrating that you are recouping the costs in that way.
That's very good to know. I appreciate that. Also, I thought it was interesting about the whole issues with co-location, because that's sure a dilemma. I don't know where I come out on that. It's a real tough one. It really is. And I guess my last question is on, you showed some of the proposals that Verizon has obviously already made to us. Do we have to worry about the shot clock in terms of getting these approved?
Maybe,
Okay.
I think is the best way to frame that. Part of the way the FCC has set up their shot clock says that, the shot clock begins at whatever the first step of your permitting process is. I'm not 100% certain what the first step truly is for Rehoboth, if it is to submit an overall proposal in this way, or if this is sort of more of a courtesy that Verizon is doing with you all to get a sense before they go through the actual application process on an individual site basis. I've seen certain locations say you have to do something like this first before you submit an application, which means the shot clock starts when this proposal would come in. It's not totally clear here, but I would say that generally speaking, keeping this moving as best as we can would certainly be advised. You don't have an actual application in front of you yet, and so whether or not the shot clock has officially started is potentially up for debate. It certainly seems that Verizon's been very accommodating and interested in working with you for what works best for you and for your streetscapes and for Rehoboth itself. So, in the interest of keeping that goodwill going, the more you can get this moving, certainly to try and get your aesthetic standards set, get their approvals in place so that they have enough time to install some of these before next year's busy season begins. It's sort of, everybody wants to be a good custodian of the overall program. We tend to find that the shot clock is very rigid. As long as the municipality or location is working really well, and again, being a good custodian of both time and program with the carrier is usually very willing to be, again, accommodating. They're not saying, it's been 10 days, we're done here, right? So it's definitely something to keep in mind, I would say. And one of the things that we keep in mind with our overall review of applications is very much based on a certain amount of time to process an application to get a request for information out based on those shot clock limits.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Commissioner Legree?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank you, Julie. You said everything that I wanted to hear. You told us we had a fantastic communications ordinance, and then you totally rewrote it. But I love what you've done, and I think it's time for us to get on with job one, which is revisions, and get on it right now. And thanks for being here. We love it. Keep it up. Thanks, Mayor.
thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Byrne and then Commissioner Shranowski. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And Julie, thank you. Excellent presentation. Very, very helpful to us as we've been wrestling with all of this. Most of my questions have been answered already. I had very similar questions, particularly around the timeline. You give a very long answer to Commissioner Gay's question around the shot clock and the timeline. Is there a shorter, more precise answer,
Um,
or I want to go to that?
Yes, let me give you a more precise answer, if you will. Generally speaking, the way the shot clocks work from the FCC is that depending on the type of installation, be it a small cell or a larger macro site, be it to be installed on a brand new structure or a structure that already exists, the shot clock will vary based on that. Generally speaking, all of these are small cell installations. In that case, especially on a new structure that does not exist currently, the timeline to review an application and permit a site is approximately 90 days.
Thank you. That is
Plus or minus, as I said.
And I agree with Commissioner LaGrie. It's time to get on. Really need to take advantage of this in the next few months. Can the city insist on co-location? I understand the pros and cons of that, but if the discussion comes out to that being more advantageous than the 300 feet separation, can the city insist on that?
Yes and no. So yes, absolutely, you can state that as your preference, but frequently you can't prohibit a carrier from installing an antenna if it is truly technically infeasible for the carrier to co-locate on that structure for any one of a number of reasons. For example, if at the end of, I'm making this up, Baltimore Avenue, there's already a pole that has 2 carriers on it, they would need to replace the pole for a 3rd time in order to put the 3rd carrier on there, which would also then not meet other standards, such as the small wireless facility standard that says the pole can't be more than 50 feet, but the 3rd carrier wants to come on, but would have to replace the pole to make it be more than 50 feet. Or for example, their coverage needs are actually on the other side of the street, more than on the side of the street with the co-located poles. There's a number of technical reasons for why that might not really be possible. And again, we would be working with you ahead of time so that all of the guardrails, if you will, were in place to truly nudge them, to force them towards co-locating on the same structure, unless there is truly no technical way to do so.
Thank you. One of the reasons that we do need a good consultant, obviously, because this gets very complex.
It does.
My last question is, you said if it's a new pole, the city is in charge. To what extent is the city in charge? Can we insist that if it's a light pole, that the light also has some of the dark sky characteristics that as a commission we have said we're going to strive to achieve in the future?
Well, it's very exciting to hear, personally speaking. I love to hear that. Definitely, absolutely. If it is so when it is a new pole, you have complete control over the aesthetics and in some ways certain technical specs as well, so long as it doesn't necessarily interfere with their ability to deploy the antenna. So you could absolutely say at the end of every street, if you want to put up a new pole, it must be this particular looking decorative pole that have this particular light fixture, or a light fixture that looks like this and must be dark sky compatible in that way. Absolutely, those are things that you can control.
Thanks, Julie. Well, I really challenge the next iteration of our commission to work toward these things. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Srnowski and then Commissioner Gossett. Commissioner Srnowski.
Thank you. Julie, you're a rock star. I think I speak for everyone here when I wish we hired you 2 years ago. Clearly, we need to modify our code. We need to modify our design standards, and excited to have you help us do that. Is the intention that you would also take over the application process? Is that the intention here?
I believe that is the case, at least the review of applications. How much of that we do, we are more or less involved in a number of different locations that we work with for processing applications. Some places we do sort of a technical review of applications, sort of the whole front information, making sure everything's complete and consistent and accurate, and the actual permitting of, making sure everything's compliant with local regulations falls to the actual permitting team, because that's how they prefer to do it. It can vary. We can do more or less depending on what you would prefer.
Okay. So on the application fee, the financial piece here, obviously if you're spending 10 hours and our team is spending 2 hours reviewing applications, we would, monetize that and charge it in the fee. What about this process? We've hired the Cohen Group, a lawyer, to help us write the code. We're engaged with you guys to help modify the code and modify our design standards. Can we monetize that and spread it out over so many years and include that in the application fee as well?
It will be a lot harder. I am not a lawyer. I'm not on a team of lawyers. It's definitely something probably to ask your legal counsel. It will be harder to do because, again, the way that the FCC has written their language says the fees can be recouped for reviewing of the actual application process. There are other things that can be put in place that can help recoup some of the costs of working on and developing this program more broadly. But it will be harder to incorporate those on an application by application basis, I believe. It might be more of a question for a lawyer, I think. Certain things can be put in place that can help with, recouping costs for doing certain things. But when the FCC has set the standard saying that the fees must be based on the tasks being done for each application, it's harder to say that re-reviewing your ordinance on an annual basis can be recouped by an individual application.
Okay, all right.
But again, not a lawyer. I don't want to.
Yeah, understood. One question for Glenn or maybe Sharon to help us in our next workshop meeting. Do we have a business license? Do we require telecommunication companies to have a business license to conduct business in town?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Evan, do you know if the telecommunications companies are required to have business licenses in town? We don't know. We'll get that answer for you.
Just before the next workshop meeting, maybe that is an area that we think about trying to recoup some of these fees or the costs to the city to develop these codes and policies. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Gossett.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Elias. I think your report card to us was enlightening, and our areas of need improvement are less than I had anticipated, but that's great. But moving forward, is the next step for CTC to develop a critical path forward and schedule and to work with our solicitor to draft language to meet these need improvement areas? Or what is the next step, in your opinion, of CTC engagement with the city?
Sure. Typically what we will do is we will actually go ahead and draft up some language based on our experience in working with ordinances and guidelines in other locations. We'll put together a first run of what we would suggest to be included or added. Very likely there's going to be sort of a big placeholder here for additional aesthetic preferences as those conversations are ongoing, right? And we will typically send them to you or to our client to review and make sure that those all meet the standards that you'd like to put in place, and suggest that they be reviewed by whatever legal team is involved with making sure that such standards are legally compliant and can be put in place in that regard. And from there, I believe it's as simple as, pretty much whatever vote or legal process is needed to make those changes. If I remember correctly, the ordinance would need a vote in order to be revised. The design standards could be revised separately without an official vote being put in place, if I'm remembering from earlier conversation correctly. But typically, that's sort of our first steps usually is sort of making a first run at edits. And of course, that conversation would be ongoing as the aesthetic questions continue to be developed. We could work with the solicitor, side by side. We tend to find that it's more streamlined if, we can make our first run and give you sort of the edits, the technical specifications we think should be there. And the solicitor sort of takes a second pass and makes sure that everything is written in the legalese as need to be.
I mean, if you have a process in place, that's wonderful. Our next workshop where this could be discussed is October 4th. I don't know whether the time commitments from your organization allow that. The next would be November 8th. So just to give you some goalposts of what I think we would expect, because this is, as everyone has said, we need to kick this into high gears because the shot clock for us is also ticking.
For sure. I would say I would want to go back to my team and double check to make sure commitment wise we certainly could make that. I see no reason why at the least by the 8th, if not the 4th, which is to say certainly by November, if not October. But I would want to double check with our team and make sure that I'm not over promising. We prefer to under promise and over deliver, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Let me remind everybody the process for changing the code. As the code is in the zoning section, we need to follow this process. We would generally at the workshop meeting, Julie, we would receive from you a red line version indicating what's deleted, what's added. We would discuss that at the next meeting. If we're satisfied with it, that we would consider adopting a resolution to go to public hearing. And then at a following meeting, we would conduct a public hearing in order to change or amend the zoning code. So there is a process that could take in standard time up to 2 months, but so we need to be aware of that. Commissioner Srnowski and then Commissioner Legree. Commissioner Srnowski.
Mayor, just to follow up on that comment, I think even more importantly here is the modification of the design standards and guidelines, which Julie had mentioned she didn't think that needed to be voted on, but it was voted on by the Board of Commissioners. So my expectation is that it would be voted on by us again. And I think that's maybe the more important piece here than the zoning code as well.
I think your dog agrees with you because
My apologies.
yes. My recollection is the design guidelines are contained within the wireless ordinance. And so, yes, they would be part of the need to go through a public hearing process. Commissioner Legree, unmute yourself.
I would recommend that as soon as we get the revision suggestions from our consultant, that we call a special meeting, have our discussions, and be ready at the workshop to introduce the beginnings of the change. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. The onus is on Julie and CTC, and we'll be in touch, Julie, to look at the time frame.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the
thing to
sooner
just
the
keep in mind,
better.
Of course, is that we have a number of suggestions that we can make to make changes to the design guidelines overall. But again, there's a lot of aesthetic questions that we can make suggestions on, but again, sort of come down to what your preferences are that will be harder for us to sort of take a first pass at. Would you prefer nudging towards co-location or prefer to nudge towards certain aesthetic preferences? Are there certain materials you prefer to have poles look like in certain areas versus others? Those are, conversations we're happy to be a part of and can set up in the, next week or two even with whomever the appropriate people would be to, help work through those questions with you if you'd like, or prefer to have them yourselves. That's fine with us too. But some of those things we can't put into place or make a first pass of revisions on until we get those answers for what you would prefer yourselves.
Thank you, Julie. Sharon and I will be in touch. We thank you. With that, we're going to go to members of the public. Carol Everhard, are you on and have any comment you'd like to offer?
No, I'll reserve comment.
Thank you, Carol. How about Walter Brittingham?
Walter is no longer on the call.
No longer on. All righty. Thank you very much, Max. If there's no more questions, we'll thank you, Julie. We'll sign off, say goodbye, and we appreciate you being with us today on such an expedited notice.
It's our pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
Great, thank you. With that, we're going to try to go back to the agenda after city manager or city solicitor's report. Do you have anything, Glenn?
Mayor, the only thing to mention is last week, the post-trial briefs got submitted in the Beach Walk case. So now there's nothing, absolutely nothing left to do in that case. We're just waiting for a decision from the judge. That's all I have, Mayor.
Very good, thank you. With that, we have no committee reports identified. We'll go to, we are.
Mayor,
Yeah.
can I just ask Glenn, do you have any expectation on when we might get a decision in that case?
So the standard is 90 days. The courts are supposed to make a decision within 90 days, and sometimes they'll ask for oral argument. They already did that in this case, so we should really be under a strict 90-day clock at this point.
All right, excellent, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to go to old business. Item A, we're deferring to the next, to the October workshop. Item B has to do with discuss an amendment to Chapter 270 zoning, specifically Section 270-4 gross floor area to clarify which commercial areas are to be included in excluding and calculating gross floor area. This, I believe, is sponsored by Commissioners Susan Gay and Commissioner Gossett. I'd like to turn it over to you all. If you would gently give a summary of why this came forward and your rationale, and give a quick summary after that of what it's all about. And then also, lastly, a summary of your most recent version changes. All right? Go ahead, Commissioner Gay.
Okay, and I'm going to be brief sort of in the background, but in the interest of time, because we have talked about it a number of times, and just kind of highlight the important reason why we're here. This parallels a clarification in the code that we made for residential about 6 months ago. And that clarification was to specifically list the elements that are and are not included in gross floor area as a way to be, crystal clear and to leave it to, take any potential for ambiguity out of it. So what we're doing here is mirroring that exact process for commercial. And the other important piece of this is that we're not changing anything. This is a clarification and a delineation of the code as it is interpreted today, and as my understanding is how it's always been interpreted. I believe since our last meeting, I think it came out after the last meeting we had on this. The court decisions came out for the two cases that challenged our commercial gross floor area, and they were upheld. Our code was upheld. So this clarification matches the court decision. It matches our history. It's not a change. Obviously, it's going to go to public hearing because it's part of the zoning code. But I just put that out there to dispel any myths that there are any changes here. There are not. Having said that, there are some further clarifications that came about after our last discussion when we talked about it at the workshop meeting, and Matt Janis was there, and I don't know if he's still with us today. I hope so. But several questions came up, really good questions from some of the commissioners about courtyards and did they have to be covered, and greenhouses and atria. And Matt Janis confirmed that yes, they do in order to be counted, and that wording somehow was not in our first draft. So the yellow highlighted areas there on numbers 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9 clarify that the structures to be included are covered in some way, and of course in terms of the HVAC one, number 8, that they're enclosed and in a habitable space. So if they're just on the roof and closed for mechanical reasons, that's not included, but if it's up there as part of a habitable space, it is. So that's the change from the last meeting, and otherwise, I guess we just need to finalize our discussion and move it forward for the public hearing. It would be where I come out on.
Matt Janis is here. Matt, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not believe so at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And Patrick, do you want to add anything to that?
You're muted, Patrick.
Sorry about that. I think you Commissioner Gay explained it well. This was in reaction to a couple of questions that were raised the last time. Went back and met with Mr. Janis before just to confirm this. And this is the way building and licensing currently interprets this and has interpreted this. And it's just a new format in the sense of making it more specific and a format that is being used more and more throughout the nation as listing what is and what is not described and included in such materials as gross floor area, et cetera.
Very good. Any further comment? If not, then we can put this on the agenda for our regular meeting of September 17th for consideration of adopting a resolution to go to public hearing in this matter. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do have a question and possibly a comment. When we discussed this last on, I believe it was August 9th, the solicitor was asked about if this passes, what is the impact on pending cases? And I believe that Glenn said that nothing here should impact pending cases. Is that correct, Solicitor?
Yeah, that's correct. The cases that were pending before the Superior Court were based on the record of the proceedings before the Board of Adjustment. So nothing here could impact them because they were record-based appeals. There is a window of opportunity right now for the decisions that just went our way recently to be appealed to the Delaware Supreme Court. I've had indication that possibly one of those cases will be, but nothing has been filed yet, so we don't know. But if they were appealed to the Supreme Court, again, nothing that you're doing with this ordinance would impact those cases because it would still be a record-based appeal.
Thank you. So is ClearSpace, for example, a pending case?
ClearSpace is a pending case, although remember these ordinances grew out of the Board of Adjustment proceedings for two commercial projects, not the ClearSpace project. The ClearSpace project that's being appealed, it is also based upon a record of the proceedings below. So this, like the Board of Adjustment cases, these ordinances and your adoption or election not to adopt them should not impact the ClearSpace proceedings.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything going on with any of the pending hotel projects that falls into the pending case?
Well, for
definition?
example, I guess Mr. Janis is currently performing a review of the Bellhaven project. I don't know that if this ordinance is merely a restatement of the way that he typically reviews a commercial project, this should not impact that review.
Okay. Thank you for all that. So then just a comment, Mayor. I just think that there's aspects to this that in the long run could work as a competitive disadvantage to our city of Rehoboth Beach. There's areas in this that I don't think are good for the economy in our city and a competitive advantage going forward.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Srnowski?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification from Glenn. You said that anything that is currently before the Planning Commission or permits that have already been submitted, at this point, the pending ordinance doctrine applies or does not apply? Or would that apply only once we set a public hearing?
Well, there's a split in the case law as to when the pending ordinance doctrine kicks in. Some say not until a public hearing has been set. Other cases say once it's introduced. So I've typically taken the position that once the ordinance is introduced, it is subject to the pending ordinance doctrine. So I think that this ordinance currently is subject to the pending ordinance doctrine.
Okay. And One other question. So there's, I think, quite a few developments that perhaps may not have submitted a permit yet, but are in preliminary review or have gone through, design, architectural design and stuff like that. I mean, what would the city's position be on at this point? Are they affected or not affected?
So generally, if an application has not been made to the city, even if there's preliminary work being done on it, generally, those applications are not in the pipeline. So they, if this ordinance is adopted, they would be subjected to this. Again, if it's a restatement of the current way that we're reviewing plans, it shouldn't make a difference. But those projects that are out there that people are working with design professionals that have not submitted yet to the city, they will be subject to these regulations if adopted. But again, it may not make any difference. I think that's what Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Gossett would say after their discussion with Matt.
Saying, yeah. And I do appreciate Commissioner Gay and Gossett. You've made some changes based on my comments and questions at the last meeting, and I appreciate that. It's definitely more clear here, and I think probably in line with what has or is being done. I've got a couple concerns. One is that the Planning Commission hasn't been consulted or asked for any input on this. And I'd like to see that happen. In addition to comparing it to what the CDC says in our code, or comparing it to the CDC. And I just feel like this disincentivize balconies, and that bothers me. I don't know why we would want them on residential properties, but not commercial. We're going to end up with a bunch of square boxes in town if we're including that in the FAR. And I just don't know that that's what I want my city to look like. So I think we're in a better, with the clarification and the changes, I think we're in a much better spot than we were a month ago. I still have some hesitation and concerns. And I would just, at the very least, very much appreciate the Planning Commission weighing in on this and comparing it to whatever the CDC says. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Commissioner, the Planning Commission always has the opportunity to introduce and comment on any of our topics. So we're not holding them back. They can certainly do that.
I understand that, but we haven't explicitly asked them to, as we have in other cases. And I would like to actually do that.
We did send it to them.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Gay, you're next. Go ahead.
Yes, we did send it to the Planning Commission members. And I did have a question back from Mike Bryan about it. I don't think it's on their agenda, but they all saw it basically. But I just want to emphasize, and I appreciate, Glenn saying it shouldn't matter, because it was never the intention to change the code at all here. I never wanted to do that. This is to reduce ambiguity, and therefore perhaps our exposure in court cases if for these particular matters. And I'm glad those came out the way they did. But this is the way it's been interpreted. It's also to create a baseline, by the way. I like balconies. I don't have anything against balconies. If we want to, pursue something for incentives or whatever, we can do that, based on what we have now, and then go from there. So that's really all it was meant to do. It is not a change. It's the way all the applications, whether they're in the first review stage or whether they're formal applications, it's the way building and licenses is interpreting it now. And it's a baseline. So, in my mind, if we were to say, well, we want to not include balconies, then you'd look, it's also a formula. It's the math. You look at the FAR of 2 and you say, well, if we're going to take some potentially large element out of that, then out of gross floor area, then you might reduce the FAR to like 1.8 or something in order that the bulk is similar. All this is creating a baseline for discussions going forward, in addition to clarifying the way it's done now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett.
I have nothing more to add at this point.
All right, thank you very much. With that, again, our path is to put this on to consider adoption of a resolution to go to public hearing at our September 17th meeting. Thank you very much. But with that, we'll go to public comment. Carol, anything on this topic?
No comment.
All right, and Walter is probably still off. Thank you very much. With that, I am going to change the two topics on garbage and refuse and recycling. That is old business C and old business D to the very end of this meeting. I will likely, depending on our time, take them off and defer them to the October workshop meeting instead, so that our new commissioners can also have the opportunity to comment on those. So with that, we're going to go to our first item of new business. A, discuss offer from Tom Ibach to take possession of the iconic Dolly sign currently installed on the roof of the old Dolly's Candyland location, northeast corner of Rehoboth Avenue at the Boardwalk. Evan, can you put that photo up for quick? You know, when Tom Ibach announced in the paper that he was leaving that location, I'm willing to bet that I got more correspondence on that topic than I did on almost everything else combined in the last year. People were very interested in it. They wanted to suggest that we force the owner to keep it there, that we create our own historic district and designated a historic item so that it couldn't be removed. Do something with the federal historic marker program to identify it as historic so it could never be moved. Put it on top of the museum. Put it on this, put it on that and there. Put it on the water tower. So at that time, I said, well, goodness gracious, I'm going to go to Tom Ibach and say, well, what does he want to do with it? And at that time, of course, he did not want it to stay forever on top of that building, especially after he would vacate that location. He didn't think that was the right thing to do. He wanted to move it to his new location, which was three doors up at his iBox candy store. And I just conferred with him over the time and suggested that he get engineering to see, number one, if it were fit and whether the cost was exorbitant or palatable. And after his engineering, he did find that the sign would not fit on his new building very well. And the engineering would be such that his roof would not hold it. He would have to do extra engineering and extra columns through the store into new footers, and the cost was rather expensive. So at that point, he decided to give it up. And as you all know, about a week or two ago, Tom Ibach called me and offered to give the sign to the city. There is a limitation on it right now with the current owner, Grotto's, that actually his lease is with the former owner of the Dolly's property that allowed him to keep the sign up to the end of the year, I believe. So it would need to be removed. We also need to be mindful that it's a great offer. It's wonderful. It's an iconic sign. We also need to be mindful that it is 35 feet wide, 25 feet tall, and carries considerable weight. So whatever it goes on is going to have to be able to be substantial enough to accommodate not just the weight, but the rotating loads of the wind blowing it and trying to blow it over. So this today is an introductory conversation with the commissioners and the public to decide, do we indeed want to accept the offer? Possibly. And what could be done with it? Rank what can be done with it and give us direction to go search out feasibility studies. By example, if you wanted to put it on top of the museum, then we need to do a feasibility study et cetera. Roger Signs made the sign. I've already been in touch with him. So if we give him direction, he knows the size, the weight, and can help us with engineering wherever we want to take it and put it. So with that, I'd like to open the conversation with being mindful that there is a cost to removal to the city. If we take it, then there's a cost to install it, and there's also a cost for maintenance on it. With that, you can take that down, and we'll go to the commissioners. Thank you, Evan. Any comments, please?
Mayor, I'll start.
Yes, sir.
I know I can speak for the Main Street folks when I say they would very much like the city to take the sign, and they'd be anxious to work with the museum in finding a good location, and they've got a lot of different ideas, and I know that they'd look at some grant opportunities as well. To help fund it. Personally, the cost factor, I think it's going to be very costly, and that provides me some hesitation. But I think we need to preserve the sign and keep it in the city, somehow.
Thank you,
There's
Ed.
a lot of history behind it that we need to preserve.
Thank you, Ed. I meant to acknowledge two bits of correspondence. I believe they're both embedded in the agenda. One from Steve Mann. He lives right outside the town, I think near Crystal or something. And he indicated the Dolly sign is an icon much like the Hollywood sign. And it's worth keeping. His suggestion was to put it on an engineered monopole somewhere at the end of Rehoboth Avenue. Between the one candy store and the current Dolly store there, on a pole 30 foot, let's say 30 feet from the Dolly store and similar height. Again, that's embedded in the agenda. And then Honey Fisher, who lives on the North Boardwalk area, indicated that she thinks we should say thanks, but no thanks. It's fun, nostalgic, quirky, but the city would be dealing with this for years to come. Because I've got the dominant responses coming to me earlier in the year when Tom Maybach announced relocating, because the dominant response was to relocate it on top of the museum. I did talk with the executive director there and just to advise her that this was coming onto the topic. As you know, or you may not know, the museum is a flat top roof, and it is recently started to have some leaking problems. They also have two air conditioners up there, one of which is the original, and apparently it's time to replace one of them. One of them's original to the ice house, the old ice house. So that can tell you how old it is. So they understand that we might be interested in doing a feasibility study, in which case we would obtain from them the drawings of the building to make sure the roof can entertain and support that weight. And again, we would work with the sign manufacturer to have him engineer and analyze it and give us costs. So again, I'm not looking today for us to say, yes, we're absolutely taking it, but more direction for what kind of analysis or feasibility studies do we want to do if we want to consider further accepting the sign. We've got Commissioner Byrne, Calusi, and Legree. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Two comments. I really appreciate what Edward said, and I go along with what Main Street and maybe the museum would like to do, and that is to work together to try to figure out where it may go in the city and to try to keep it here. I certainly support that. And then my second comment is an attempt to interject a little bit of humor here this morning, and that is that a local pundit here in town recently suggested that the city purchase the 3 clear space lots move the sign there and create a Dolly's Park.
I
Meant to be funny.
think there's already a Dolly's Land down south, but
Yeah,
yeah,
something
okay.
like that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Calusi?
So I have very mixed feelings about this. It is iconic. It's something that I, think about when I think of Rehoboth, but at the same time, I'm trying to think of the future and how I believe our boardwalk is going to change in terms of what will be on the boardwalk and potentially 2 new hotels. I like, one question I did have for you, Mayor. Did you say that the museum likes the idea of putting this on top of their building, or have they not made a commitment?
No, they haven't said anything, and understand that the city owns the building, so I think we would carry a lot of weight if we said we wanted to do that.
Sure.
What I think would be important, though, is that we would likely need some kind of memorandum of understanding on who maintains the sign, who maintains the roof under the sign, especially if the sign installation alters the roof in any way. So we might have the cost, again, the costs for installing are one thing, but in this particular location, it could include additional costs for re-roofing, which would be hopefully a one-time deal, but necessarily could be very expensive.
So for all of us who have been coming here for, a good part of their lives, I think the nostalgia is important, but I also think if it was installed on top of the museum, it would be somewhat confusing. I almost would rather have something that looks just like that says, "Welcome to Rehoboth Beach," I don't know. So I just have mixed feelings about it, and I won't be voting on this in the future anyway, so I just am giving you my opinion on that. I think it's very mixed feelings on it, but thank you.
Thank you very much. If you recall, Evan, can you put up that picture again real quick? I'm sorry. If you recall, on the exterior facing Rehoboth Avenue, there was a blue sign that said Dolly's, which is already taken down from there, because I just took that last week. Yeah, that's where it was on there. If you recall, there is a blue, I think, plywood or sign that's been given already to the museum. It's already been repainted and renovated and already installed inside the museum. So there is a bit of nostalgia already on the interior of that building. You can take that down again. Thank you, Evan. Commissioner Legree and then Commissioner Gossett.
The sign is 60 years old. And in the ensuing 60 years, and that sign was built to withstand darn near anything. I mean, there is nothing that was going to blow that sign down once they had rebuilt it. And in the ensuing 60 years, there have been, I'm sure your sign man will tell you, there have been many changes to the art and technique and the science of building signs and the materials that they use. If you'll look at that sign again, you'll see that it's just massive bracing behind the Dolly sign. And there was a reason for that. And those pipes are old, heavy, galvanized steel pipes, and they weigh a lot. What we might do is just ask Mr. Eibach if we could use that design and make one just like it out of composite or new materials if we have to have it, and demolish the old sign and have a replica that's modern and up to date. The library, or excuse me, the Historical Society, the museum needs a new roof with new substructure. We're looking at multiple thousands to replace the HVAC on that building. So, and I'm not even sure that the building could be modified to support the weight of that sign. A lightweight sign perhaps, but a lot of complications that need to be thought through before we ask the Historical Society to put it on top of a museum. And that's what I have to say. I'm like everybody else. I think it's great. It's part of our brand, and it's been on the boardwalk, but it's going to be really difficult to maintain it as is, and putting it on a single pole somewhere is also really tough to do because of the weight and the bracing that's behind that sign. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I personally would not want it on a monopole at the end of Rehoboth Avenue. I think it would dominate and ruin the view shed. But again, I'm not looking for us to say absolutely we're going to take it. I'm looking at, is there an interest enough that warrants doing a feasibility study wherever we decide it should go. And again, part of this feasibility study would be, what the condition of the sign, and also where's it going to go, what's it going to sit on, will it hold it up, and what's the future maintenance cost, so that we all have a good idea of it. I believe this sign was replaced in my life here, so it's within 23 years. So this is not the original 1960 sign that came down. This was one, I believe, replaced in the 90s, late 90s, 98 maybe, or 99, 2000. I believe of aluminum and totally refabricated. So it's not as old as perhaps you're thinking. Commissioner
Well,
Gott?
bracing behind it looks like it's aluminum. I'm not sure of the supporting poles. If they're aluminum, they look like they have turned to something that looks exactly like galvanized steel. But who knows? I haven't been up there. Have you been up there?
No, we'll leave that to engineers or to the sign company.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not either.
Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, thank you. I think this falls into the needs versus wants category. And I would support, an investment of a few $1,000s to do a feasibility study just to see if the sign is salvageable. Lynn Rogers is the one that installed it back. I think this one went up in the early 80s, and talking with some of the folks around town, knocked down the wooden sign and this aluminum sign was put up. But to see if it would be feasible to put it on the roof of the museum. Again, I question about 10 or 15 years from now, will people know what Dolly's means if they drive into town? So again, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and the only way to get to some of those answers is to, if you will, do a feasibility study or talk to Lynn Rogers and just say, what would be the cost to move it, to remove it, could the roof of the museum support it, and that type of thing. So I don't think we really have any data to work on other than, yeah, it's a nice idea, but it's more of a want than a need in my mind.
Thank you. Commissioner Gay, and then Commissioner Sharnowski. Commissioner Gay?
First of all, my gut reaction when I first heard about this, I was sort of cheering that we had the opportunity to potentially save it. I do think it's a valuable piece of our history, and it's iconic and analogous to the Hollywood sign is not incorrect and all that. However, I've learned a couple of things today that I didn't know before, and that is, first of all, about the wooden sign that used to be on the front and how that's now saved in the Historical Society. That's great. And also that the sign we're thinking of saving isn't really historical at all. It may only be, 20 years old or whatever. So maybe there is a way. I mean, I support doing a feasibility study, and I think we have to have an open mind. And I'm also concerned about where the money's going to come from for the ultimate placement and ongoing maintenance, and want to look for a funding structure, whether that's a grant or people can donate or whatever. I would like to, we obviously have to take that into consideration, but it seems to me we do need to have an open mind, because while the concept of dollies is certainly an important piece of our history, that sign may or may not be, and we may be able to save the history in other ways.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharnowski?
Thank you, and I agree with Susan Gay. On on there might be other ways to preserve history. One of the interesting things about this sign is not so much the sign or dollies, it's where it's located now. And it's what you see coming down Rehoboth Avenue, and it's the horizon that you see looking out at the beach. And us taking that and moving it someplace else, yeah, there's still historic and value, and it's part of our brand, but it's not going to be anything like it is now. And I think we need to recognize that and realize that and understand that. And I'll just mention that I think one of the most expensive things in this process would be to try to figure out how to put it on a roof someplace, like the museum, and that's going to be the more expensive part. I just would mention one idea that came from some of the board members at Main Street is that we don't try to do that, and it is at ground level, someplace perhaps over behind Grove Park or the museum by the canal, and create it as a selfie station for people to come and take selfies, which I think doing something like that would be a lot less expensive, and the feasibility study would be a little bit more manageable. But I support doing the feasibility study, but I am personally torn on this one.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Coluzzi?
Yes, thank you, for the comments from Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Chernoski. It's, I think you're right. The history of it can be preserved in other ways. And I like this idea of perhaps putting it in Grove Park. It'll be meaningful to some people, but as Commissioner Chernoski said, part of what Dolly's, that sign was about was seeing it from the beach, seeing it from the boardwalk, and putting it somewhere else is not particularly, meaningful. And so I support the other idea of perhaps thinking about putting it in Grove Park or ground level somewhere, for people, making it some other potential iconic idea in the future. So that would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just follow up with one more comment. I would very much like to hear from the folks at the Historical Society and the museum, as the sort of the experts in historic preservation and history, what their thoughts are in how we preserve that history. And it sounds like they've already taken some steps with the other sign, but I think hearing from them would be helpful for me in deciding what to do moving forward with this topic.
Sure. Well, I can approach Nancy Alexander and David Mann on that. Otherwise, I've only heard of two ideas from the commissioners, and that's a ground level selfie station and roof mounting on the top of the museum. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this? Carol, are you still on?
I am still here. I would just say that, you're right, it's iconic. The visitors love having their picture taken on the boardwalk with that sign in the background. So I don't know how it would work on the ground. Perhaps they would still do that. It's a dilemma. You got a dilemma on your hands. The visitors love it. Those that return, we have so much return visitation, and they love it. And there's just picture after picture with it. But I can't remember which commissioner said it will not be the same as it is right now, no matter where you put it.
Right. Thank you, Carol. Well, I'll get the directions from the commissioners, and we can certainly, I guess, do self-analysis and thought on a ground level selfie station. But roof mounting on the museum would require a feasibility study. I don't know if there's cost to that or minimal cost, certainly, but I will, for the majority I've heard, agree with conducting a feasibility study. So we will go ahead with that as soon as we can and report back. I'm afraid it's going to be rather costly, more than we think. So it's probably good to get some exact figures on that. If there's no other comments, then we'll go to the next topic. which is the second item of new business, discuss purchase of the Santa House from the Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce and options for storage, maintenance, and operation if purchased. If you recall, some time ago, can you put up on the screen? If you recall, back in late 2020, we adopted an unattended display policy. And unfortunately, or in my eyes, unfortunately, at that time, it caused the Santa House to not be able to be used that year because it was attended by Santa at certain times. And of course, Santa would go home in the middle of the night and it would be unattended. Since that time, I personally have always wanted the Santa House to return. I think it's part of our seasonal display program. The pictures there, go to that other one there, show you the popularity of seeing Santa Claus. And I've always wanted to bring it back, and a lot of constituents have voiced the same. So I went and talked with Carol Everhart to talk about how to get Santa back, because if you recall, they manage the Santa program, if you will, and coordinate with Santa to come here. And the city, to be able to get it back there, could construct their own Santa house, or they could buy one from an outside vendor, which didn't make sense if there's already one there. So I approached Carol Everhart and asked if they might be willing to sell it to us and let us take care of it and maintain it, put it out there, paint it if we needed to, store it, but let them do the management of coordinating Santa and the visitors coming here. And Carol met with her board and indicated that they were amenable to that scenario. So I wanted to put it in front of the commissioners, just like the Dolly sign. There's an initial cost, but then there's a maintenance cost on keeping it there, moving it, storing it. Just FYI, how it's done now is a auto towing company puts it on a flatbed, drops it off in location, and they unwrap it because it will have plastic wrap on it. And then I don't know who maintains it, but I guess the chamber does. And then at the end of the season, the company comes back and takes it to a boat storage yard where it's wrapped in clear plastic, like they do wrap the boats to keep vermin out of it, and where it's stored again for the outside season. So I'd like to offer that to the commissioners, that it would fit our unattended display policy because the city would own the Santa House and maintain it. But again, there's a cost to doing so. Cost is anywhere from, I think Carol can correct me, in the neighborhood of $5,000 annually to move it and maintain it. Of course, we would be doing maintenance in-house, but we would probably still have our forklifts or equipment to move.
Despite the cost, I think this is something we need to do. It's part of our brand here in Rehoboth, and it's part of the season that we all love so much. So I think we just move forward with buying it and maintaining it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would, Commissioner Gossett here, I would agree with that. I think it is part of the celebratory season that we have here in Rehoboth, and it's been part of us for many, many years. It brings a lot of joy and kind of remembering being here as you were a kid when you went to the Santa House. So I think it's something that we certainly should move forward on as part of our brand and attracting people in the off season, as it were, and bringing locals back into town.
Commissioner Gay?
And I agree with what Commissioners Fanowski and Gossett have just said. Absolutely.
Commissioner
Mayor, I
Byrd?
won't be- Mayor, I
Commissioner
won't
Byrne?
be here to vote on this if this comes up at a voting meeting, but I'm certainly supportive for all the reasons that are stated. It's an attraction, and it's one that we should continue.
I would also agree. I support the idea.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I have heard that Santa is scheduled to come back this year, so that's good. We don't want to have to turn him away. What I will do, based on your comments, is we will contact Carol and work with her on the management part of this, the purchase, of course, and then to manage it, because that's something that they've done a great job doing in the past. They have a direct line to Santa, and we don't. And it'll be easy for them to get Santa here each year. Carol Everhart, we'll go to the members of the public, and that's you.
Well, thank you for the support. That house is about 50 years old. It was built by former board members and residents in Rehoboth Beach. And we're just interested in keeping the tradition alive. So I'm sure we can work out a memorandum of understanding and a low-cost price on this and make it happen.
Very good. Any questions of Carol? If not, thank you very much, Carol. We appreciate your offer. We'll be in touch and looking forward to this holiday season being able to invite Santa back into town. By the way, that picture, put up that picture again, Evan, real quick. That would be the top picture. I noticed the other day when I was looking at this, Carol, that there behind the Santa, there are wire figures that have lights on them. I see on the a duck and sand dollar and some other things. And we wondered if you would maybe throw those in with the deal also. Oh, she might have been excited.
No problem. No problem.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much. We're gonna get a good deal here. Thank you, Carol. With that, we'll go to the next item of business, which is discuss appointment of Dave Diefendorfer to the Street and Transportation Committee. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes. Unfortunately, I missed the last workshop meeting, and we had brought this up. I had brought this up actually 2 months before. Dave's been very interested in participating and has had good ideas that he has sent to various members of the committee. And we had all the members voted to have him on the committee. So I would like to see that happen. And it's up to the commissioners to vote him in, I guess, next voting meeting.
Very good.
That's
Thank you. Yes, at the September 17th meeting, we will vote to consider his appointment. Thank you, Commissioner. If there's no other questions, we'll go to the next item of business, which is discuss commission and board memberships, appointments, reappointments, and chair assignments to committees. There's a support document embedded in the agenda. If you recall, what I am focusing on at this point for consideration of vote for appointment or reappointment at the September 17th meeting is the three quasi-judicial boards or bodies, the Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, and the Planning Commission. I'm also seeking chairs. I put out a memo. I haven't received a reply from some of you. If you recall, in the chair position, with Commissioner Burns' absence, we need a liaison to the Cape Henlopen Senior Center. Also, in Commissioner Calusi's absence, we need a chair for the Street and Transportation Committee. And we also need a chair for fill a vacancy on the Personnel Committee. Environment Committee needs a chair, and the Animal Issues need a chair. Now, Commissioner Ed Shranowski has offered to chair the Environmental Committee. And why the chairs is important to be able to identify is because we rely on the chairs to make recommendations for appointments and reappointments for their individual committees. So please respond to my other email, and if you're interested in chairing any of those or anything new, let me know. So back to the Board of Adjustment, the term ends for Barry Brandt. I'd like to reappoint him for another 3-year term. He is interested in staying on there. The Parks and Shade Tree Commission, I'd like to reappoint Francis Bunky Markert. If you recall, he filled a vacated seat for just a year, and I'd like to now reappoint him for a 3-year term. He is currently the chair of the Parks and Shade Tree Commission, and he's been doing a good job. And we've invested a lot of time with him learning the position, and he's showing some leadership skills there. I'd also like to appoint Edie Heron, a new appointment for a 3-year term on the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. For Planning Commission, Mike Strange's term is up. He has to be reappointed, and I'd like to reappoint him. And then for vacated seats for Lee Weber, who asked not to be reappointed, and for Jeff Trunzo, who sold his house and therefore does not qualify to remain a member of the Planning Commission. I found 2 new appointments that I would like to nominate at the September 17th meeting for appointment, and that is John Dewey and Nan Hunter. I believe they both have very, very nice resumes. I hope you've read their resumes and their applications and will support me in these. And with that, if there's any questions or comments, otherwise we'll put these on for consideration at the September 17th regular meeting. Any comments? Commissioner Legree?
You're muted.
We're gonna have 2 new commissioners voting on these folks, and they might want to come up to speed as far as the qualifications and then the recommendations. And I'm not sure how the best way to do that. Just some thoughts.
I'm not sure what you're saying. I will share the applications for everybody with them. Is that what you mean? Yeah,
You bet.
sure, absolutely, absolutely. Commissioner Shranowski?
Yeah, Mayor, have you shared the applications with us already? I don't recall seeing them.
Yes, and in a memo to you all about 2 weeks ago, where I was seeking chairs and other information from you, there was a memo in there for you to contact Ann Womack for access to all the applications. So contact her, Commissioner, and she'll give you a code that allows us into that. That allows us into an organized portal folder for all the committee, commission, board, task force applications that are unredacted. If members of the public want to see a application, then they need to file a FOIA application, in which case some of the personal information would be redacted, but otherwise they would get to see the balance of the application, including a resume and stuff like that.
Understood. I think I know everyone that you're nominating, and except Nan Hunter. I don't know that individual, but otherwise I'm very supportive of your nominations.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay, please.
I just wanted to just make one comment about what jumped out at me when I saw the highlighted list, and that is it's a nice mixture of reappointments and new appointments, which I think is important for continuity purpose. And then it's even. There's 3 reappointments and 3 new appointments, and on the 2 boards where there's more than one appointee, it's mixture within that board as well as overall. So I like that. I think that's a good mix of new and current.
Thank you. And I will share with you that I conferred with all the chairs, Chair of the Board of Adjustment, Chair of Planning Commission, Chair of Parks and Shade Tree Commission for their input. And they were all very supportive of my picks and nominations. So that to me is very, very important because they're the ones that have to work with the new appointees. Commissioner Legree?
And both of the incoming commissioners would be great chair of committees too. And I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is discuss bid results obtained for the fiscal year 22 street paving program. Evan, is that you?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. So here today to fill in for Kevin to present the fiscal year 2022 street paving program bid results. You'll recall the fiscal 22 street paving plan includes Stokely Street Extended, Lake Drive, Olive Avenue, including a water main replacement on Olive Avenue, North Surf Avenue, and also the alleyway just behind or to the north of Christian Street. So here's a breakdown of the street paving program bid results. The first line, you'll see the engineer's estimate at $648,399.19. George and Lynch was the low bidder, very close to the engineer's estimate at $643,306.33. You can see that all the bids came in relatively close to one another, which is a good sign. And then also you'll recall at the bottom there that the fiscal 22 year budget amount, we initially had $450,000 in for paving. We added an additional $100,000 from American Rescue Plan funds. And then we also had budgeted $150,000 for water main replacements. So the recommendation is just that we're requesting the board take action next week at your regular meeting, September 17th, to approve the award of the contract, the paving contract to George and Lynch, Inc. in the amount of $643,306.33. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And the support documents and bid tabs are embedded in the agenda if you want any more information. So as requested, we will put that on for consideration or vote at our September 17th regular meeting.
Mayor, one question for Evan. So we're about, I think, 52,000 under budget. Have you guys thought about adding another street on because the bids are lower than we budgeted?
Sure. So taking a look at the numbers, I think we had around 34,000 came under budget for the street paving and then about 22,000 for the water main replacement. So in talking to Kevin right now, we'd like to sort of keep that as a contingency. In the event that that money's not needed, we would then put that towards the water main replacement program.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Evan, one other question on the map that you presented. It shows, as I see it, only a portion of the alleyway behind the library done. Is that correct, or is there going to be full repair back there?
That's correct. It is just a portion of that alleyway. I think that particular section has had some serious damage and potholes on that stretch of the road. So I think that was something that was added on whenever the American Rescue Plans, those funds were added to this project.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I just want to add that, and this is not for today, I think these numbers are obviously fine and fit in with the budget, but I think going forward and maybe during the CIP discussions during budget is an ideal time to do it, that I would like to sort of revise our thinking about how we do this to incorporate two things. One, more green infrastructure, and secondly, and tied in with that, to see if any of our paving projects should be pervious. I understand that's more expensive. I understand there's maintenance issues. However, we can't, kick the can down the road forever, and we really have to take a serious look at these green infrastructure needs going forward. And it may mean changing the program. I also think we should take a long view of what's in the pipeline to be for the paving, next fiscal year and the next year, and maybe 3 years out. and look at making some environmental changes like that.
Very good. And I think we can task the city administration with doing some research on pervious paving. There's pluses or minuses to pervious paving, whether it's sidewalks or asphalt. And I think it would be of value to research what other municipalities in Delaware have used, especially beach towns, because we've got that stuff called sand that's liable to clog it up. But if they do research, then when we get to that point, it'd be nice to hear their report on it. Thank you. Commissioner Legree?
I agree with the mayor. There are definitely pluses and minuses. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. If there's no further comment, thank you, Evan. We appreciate you being here and giving that. I am, because of the late time, I am going to defer those two items, topics on garbage, refuse collection, recycling, to the October workshop meeting. That'll give the new commissioners opportunity to give their input. And as far as I know, Evan, there's no absolute time crunch on any of that ordinance or recycling or anything. I don't think so. Yeah, okay. With that, we wanted to go to the last item of old businesses, which thank you to outgoing elected officials. You know, too many times, in my opinion, we don't say goodbye to those officials that have worked with us for 3 years. And I think it's very important to recognize them, that we appreciate their collaboration on a lot of the projects, and some of, both Commissioner Richard Byrne and Commissioner Caluzzi have contributed a lot to the city, including chairing committees. And I just wanted to personally thank you in front of however many are watching us today. So thank you very much. Any other comments?
Mayor, I'd like to thank you for the comments you made for them. And I'd also like to, I think it would be great if we added in our normal practice a resolution for outgoing elected officials, something that tangible that everyone can have to recognize their service. So that's just a thought of mine.
Well, I'll consult with them. If they would like something, we can certainly do that. I know that over the years, we used to give out a plaque, and too many times I heard the plaque went into the trash afterwards. So we can certainly do a resolution or offer a plaque, because everybody that serves should be proud of their service. So Commissioner Legree?
I'd just like to say to Nick and Pat, you have expertise, you have knowledge, you have history, you have a track record. Stay engaged. We want you to stay engaged. Stay with us. And thanks for a good job, well done. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. With that, we'll go to the next item.
I will stay engaged. I always have, and I will continue to do so.
You sure have. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to commissioner announcements and comments. I just want to say two things. One is we are still soliciting applicants for committees and commissions. Even though we're appointing, you never know when somebody might resign or something happens. And we've still got committee appointments coming up. So please feel free to fill out a committee application. Your best bet is to go online to the cityrehoboth.com website, go to the legislative portal, look up meetings, click on meetings, and that will bring you to all the public meeting bodies. So you can look at mission statements and membership and click on a little button for application. So we would welcome you and your input. And if you don't get on a committee, we would still welcome you to come to meetings and share your perspectives with us. My other item is I wanted to also thank staff that was around for the Labor Day weekend. A lot of us took the 3-day weekend off, but a lot of the staff worked that 3-day weekend to help keep our city clean, safe, and of course friendly. And I wanted to thank them with that. Are there any other commissioner comments or announcements? If not, review future meeting dates. Our next meeting is a regular meeting on September 17th, Friday at 2 o'clock. That's where we have our swearing-in ceremony for our newly elected commissioners, as well as some business conduct. We've done citizen comment. Are there any further comments by the commissioners? If not, I'll adjourn this meeting at 1:57 p.m.